It's 6:30. This is the Planning and Zoning Commission for the City of Anchorage. Clerk, will you please take roll?
Ms. Dean? Here. Mr. Ferguson?
Here.
Mr. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Spring? Mr. Strike?
Here.
Ms. Barker? Here. Mr. Walker?
Here.
Mr. Sporhays?
Here.
Thank you.
The minutes, anyone have any comments on the minutes for Monday, May 5, 2014? Seeing and hearing none, those minutes are approved as submitted. Ms. Dean, Commissioner Dean, will you please handle the disclosures?
Commissioner Sporhays, do you have anything to disclose?
I do not.
Commissioner Ferguson, do you have anything?
No, I do not.
Mr. Walker?
Yes, I have a small item to disclose. With regard to the regular agenda, item F5, I recuse myself from what I would casually call the municipal component of that project, the Academy Vanguard project, because it affects a site that my family owns that I'm developing. I don't see it being an issue for this part of the project, but I wanted to put it on the record.
The piece of property you own is not contiguous to the new Seward Highway there.
No, it's not even on that exhibit.
Okay, thank you.
So at this point, since we know that you have disclosed that, should we ask the questions and go through the process? Okay, we won't. And we're on to Commissioner Strike.
No issues.
Okay. And Commissioner Robinson?
None.
And Commissioner Barker?
In the matter of Resolution 2014-028, I was not present for that meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
down here, I was actually, I need to be withdrawn from Resolution 2014-012 on the consent agenda because I was not seated on the commission at that time.
Anybody else got anything else on the consent agenda?
And I have nothing.
Okay, so we have Commissioner Strike, is that who was excused? No. Walker and Sporhays are excused from 2 items of the consent agenda there. Barker. Pardon me, Barker. Okay, thank you. Thank you for bailing me out again. Before we get off special order of business, the chair would like to make an announcement or a clarification. In Saturday's paper, there was a Jim Ferguson convicted of child abuse. It is not your chair. I want to assure you that. I have had a number of phone calls, and I'm trying to save my fellow commissioners the effort of trying to figure out how to ask me if I was convicted or not. I was not, but I will pass that on that one. We've done disclosures. Before we go to the consent agenda, we have 2 items of business there. We have an informational item, case 2014-0108, the Brother Francis Shelter Status Report to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Do we start with, do we have a staff report on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be quite brief. This is a status report that was required by P&Z Resolution 2012-23. It does update the Commission on the status of community concerns as was particularly required, and the effectiveness of the memorandum in place between the FCC and CSS. Susan Bomalaski of Catholic Social Services and Mark Feynman are both here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
This is not a public hearing, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Brother Francis Shelter, would your representative come forward, please, and give your report? Go ahead. Yes, state your name for the record.
Susan
Congratulations on your
Bomalaski.
pending retirement.
Oh, thanks. It's transitioning.
Transitioning.
Susan Bomalaski, Executive Director, Catholic Social Services.
Go ahead and proceed.
Well, actually, Mr. Feineman and I, who together prepared the report, think that it speaks for itself, and we're here to answer any questions you might have on that report. We feel like we've done due diligence in working with the Fairview Community Council to address their concerns and agree with them on the off-site impacts. We do our best to mitigate what we can around the shelter. That continues to be a concern. We feel like the MOA that's put in place is working well.
Anything further?
Yes, sir?
Continue.
That's really all I have to say. I think...
All right, why don't you stand there for just a second. Do we have enforcement here to answer my question on enforcement?
Mr. Chair, I was remiss in not introducing Mr. Jack Frost. He is here, and he is the supervisor of the code enforcement section.
Mr. Frost, would you come forward for just a second? Mr. Frost, would you state your name and spell it for the record, please?
My name is Jack Frost, F-R-O-S-T. I'm Chief Code Enforcement, and that includes supervision of the land use enforcement section for the municipality.
Okay. I ask that you be here tonight to discuss the number and type of complaints we've received with the Brother Francis Shelter.
We received one complaint on, I believe, March 13th of this year, and it was unsubstantiated.
So we've only had one complaint through the process.
That's correct. For land use enforcement. There were two previous ones for health items back in 2011, and one was unsubstantiated, one was resolved.
Reading the information we've gotten from the Fairview Community Council, I was under the opinion that we had a bigger problem than that. Do we?
Those are the only complaints we've had on the Brother Francis Shelter. I think if you'll note also in the report, sir, that the on March 19th, I believe it was, there was an inspection conducted by Rich Fern and a member of the planning staff, and they found no violations at all within the facility or the grounds.
Does staff have any questions for code enforcement? Does staff, the commission have any questions for code enforcement? Mr. Walker?
Ms. Is it Bomalaski? So I see we have Mr. Oliva in the audience with us today, and we've heard him speak a number of times on your facility and its impacts on the neighborhood. And I think we're all familiar with the photograph of thousands of vodka bottles stuck in the chain link fence just down the street. I'm not suggesting that the responsibility for that lies entirely on the shoulders of your facility, but obviously that is probably a peripheral impact I think we could all agree on. Do you think that we've heard this in the last few months? I mean, are you guys taking steps to help mitigate those kinds of impacts on the neighborhood? I mean, I realize they're off-site, but...
We continue to have our trash pickups, within the block radiuses that are specified here. We also received permission from the landowner across the street to help with cleanup of a camp that was set up on the property across the street from us. Unfortunately, those camps are proliferating down Carlock and also up 3rd Avenue. There's 3 tents up there. We called the police this afternoon. We were informed because we wanted to know, okay, why is the police getting on the camps located in other parts of town and not near us? And they said if someone has a tarp and a piece of cardboard, that's not considered a camp, so they can't post that. And if the tents aren't up for a period of time, they can't post them if they're down and up. So our hands are a little bit tied there, and I have to say that we read thoroughly the letter from the Fairview Community Council, and we agree with comments in there, and we've been soliciting the help of the municipality, APD, to help with the situation there. We have frequent calls to APD. I know that's been brought up by people in the past. if you look at those numbers, they've increased over the years, along with the community. Violence is increasing at the shelter as well. And we're waiting for the police to respond to our request to have the policemen, as part of their volunteer job that's required with their contract, to come and place themselves at the shelter and help us in that way. So we have extended our reach somewhat with the cleanup, but there's only so far we can go. Going on private property and removing things is really beyond what we can do. So I agree there's offsite impacts. I'd like to find a community solution to those impacts. I feel that we are doing what we can within our purview.
We are all seeking a community solution. It's not just your issue. It's not just the neighbors' issues. It's statewide and citywide, and we are in agreement on that.
And we'd love to play, whatever role we can in that, because we're part of the community, and we all want the community to be safe for everyone, including our homeless guests that come to us, the majority of whom are not contributing to those issues, but want to be safe and secure as well.
Mr. Strike?
Yes, and you mentioned the police calls.
I can't hear you.
You've mentioned the police calls.
Yes, sir.
How many, do you have an estimate, or do you have a number of how many police calls occurred last year?
We asked
And
for
am I missing it? Is that in your report?
No, we asked for that to be pulled for this meeting, so I have that information here. I can leave it to be put into the record. In 2013, there were 1,049 calls. So over the course of the year, that's about 3 a day. The highest number of those is for disturbance. The next highest number is for medical. We've got it all broken down. This year is on track to be about the same. So the staff that work at the shelter are often put in a situation of handling a disturbance themselves or calling the police, and we as an agency for risk management we want them to err on the side of calling the police. So that's why we approached the municipality. Isn't it cheaper to station an officer there, at least for a few hours, or a patrol car coming in and out, versus coming down there 3 times a day?
Or would you view any of these calls as being misdirected to the police and being complaints? You seem to have them broken out into disturbance and medical.
Complaints about us, you mean, or?
About the property, about other misdirected calls.
Oh, these are all calls to 911 for assistance. So I don't think they're from the community. I mean, I'd have to ask probably them, but it's their standard form, animal problem, assault, bombs, burglaries, lists like that.
One of the confusions we've heard over the past probably year is that many persons in the community don't know who to call to lodge a complaint, which I believe is one of the reasons we have Mr. Frost here today. So it surprises us to hear that there's only one complaint officially lodged in that direction. Are you receiving any complaints that come directly into your facilities from the community?
I receive calls from the community. Yes, I do, mainly about the camping around there, and we explain what we can do and can't do around that. People aren't complaining about our operation of the facility, and I don't think this body is either. It's the off-site impacts of that. So we do have to explain that. We also have to explain that Beans Cafe is right there. In fact, somebody asked me, well, how many of these complaints are really going on at Beans, but the call gets directed to us. I think Beans gets their fair share as well, too. I really think they're around the off-site impact. So, maybe, I don't know if it would help raise it up in the view of the municipality if those calls about that area. We do have other functions in that area. The jail, the safety center are there. Downtown Soup Kitchen's right up the street. Carlick Manor's right down the street a little bit. So, I think, again, Fairview Community Council's approach is that that's too much of a concentration, in that area. We'd sure like some help in addressing the issues.
Trust me when I say that, from my standpoint, Brother Francis is a very needed, and not desired, but very needed entity here in the community. And so when we ask these questions, it's not to tear apart, but to help make it better and to help defray a lot of the community issues that are going outside the gate, so to speak.
And I appreciate that. I'm not sure what to do. When people are across the street, on that hill, up here, over there, They're not coming into the shelter for services. We've changed our services to try to be more attractive to people. We're a little bit stymied as well. I mean, I have 2 staff on with, the guests that are there inside the shelter, but, we can't police the streets. So I would love to, I don't know if the task force would be helpful from this group.
We talk about, you've spoken about the garbage pickup that's taken place, but you can't go on to other properties. You're just concerned about the garbage there at your facility?
Well, and
Off-site,
the block's
or-
radius around on the street. It's private property. And we did in the case of these camps, because they were so blatant, ask the owner of that property if we could go on and clean it up, which we did. We cleaned them all off. Unfortunately, they're back. The owner of that property said that they were going to be building on that property, so that would not be a problem, but we haven't seen that start yet.
So you would need permission from the other property owners
To have our staff
expand-
go on
staff
private
on their
property, yes, sir.
To clean that up.
Anything else, Mr. Strike? No. Ms. Dean?
Through the chair, Beans Cafe is a separate address, a separate parcel of property, or is it one parcel? Do you know?
They have a separate address, so it's my understanding they would have their own list of calls that would happen during the day. They supervise the campus during the day. We supervise the campus from 5 o'clock on. We have a memorandum of agreement. We share the parking lot, but not an address. They have a different address.
So, but they're still owned by Catholic Social Services?
No, they're a separate 501c3.
Totally separate?
Yes,
They're
yeah.
not funded by
No.
Catholic Social Services?
No, they
Okay, I
do
was
all
just
their own
trying to
fundraising. That's a question that a lot of people have. They think that we're part of the same organization.
Okay.
So we've been having campus meetings and trying to, consolidate, cooperate with how we handle the individuals that use the campus. We'd sure like it to be a workforce campus, not a hanging about campus. Sometimes that's easier said than done, but we are moving in that direction.
Are you guys tied in at all with the Community Service Patrol?
Oh,
Do you
gosh,
have
yes.
any- Okay, so what is your
Yeah.
relationship with them when they pick people up? What is your relationship with them after that
Well,
point?
we have a good relationship. They don't have a set criteria on what they use to pick people up. It's not even a set breathalyzing level. It's more based on behavior. So we may see a behavior that we think they need to go to CSP. CSP may or may not agree with us. They may or may not take them. And then they also let people go from there, and they may come down to our facility from there.
Is it possible, are you guys calling CSP directly and not the police when you have issues? So we have police calls, and then we have additional calls to CSP to pick people up. So do you have any idea what the counts would be for calling CSP? I'm sure it's a daily occurrence.
I'd have to check it out. We call CSP, Brother Francis Shelter is a damp shelter, so if somebody has been drinking and they appear behaviorally appropriate and safe, they can come in. If we feel like they're behaviorally inappropriate and that their level of intoxication is going to cause them physical harm, that's when we call. So I would have to get that number for you, because we don't have medics at BFS like they do at CSP. I don't have that number.
Is there any other phone numbers that you guys call for direct help? We talked about the police, we've talked about Community Service Patrol. Is there any other agencies or groups that you guys call directly for help?
Well, we call people all the time. Unfortunately, most of them go off duty at 5. We call Anchorage Community Mental Health Services if people have mental health questions. We call hospitals. We get people to hospitals, but again, that often is an emergency call. We call protective services all the time on people that we feel are a harm to themselves, but that's a pretty hard level to meet, because if they think somebody is well enough to say, I want to go to Brother Francis Shelter, they're not going to put them against their will. Okay, and I just got a note here that all calls go to the same dispatch. 911 gets to the safety center, so I misspoke on that earlier. Thank you.
So 911 decides whether it's Community Service Patrol or the police that come?
Well, I think that we would probably tell them that it was an inebriation issue, right?
I guess I'm just trying to understand what all the possible calls.
If I may, when we call...
Can you say your name?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm Mary Beth Brakel,
Thank you.
Deputy Director with Catholic Social Services. So we do call the Safety Center or 911, but it goes through the same dispatch. I'm
believing, not positive, but I'm believing those calls are all included in here because it goes through the same dispatch.
But we're not totally sure.
Not totally sure.
I can find out.
We can find out.
Okay, thank you.
But they do end up in the same call center.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I've got one more question for you, then one question for Jack Frost. If you could make 3 steps to help improve the community's perception of the problem, to solve the problem, what 3 steps would you do?
I would, 1, get a police officer stationed at Brother Francis Shelter. It wouldn't have to be 24/7. It could be in the busiest hours. We could decide that. I'd have the municipality enforce the no camping along Carlook. And 3rd, that whole area around there. I'd also change the safety center. In other communities, the safety center has limited services. The safety center consumes about $4 million a year to run it. And in other communities, if someone overuses that, and they define that overuse maybe by going more than twice a week in there or whatever, there's a forced choice. You go to treatment, you go to jail. So I've probably been saying that for about 5 years. It doesn't seem to get any traction, but...
Okay, those are all changes other people would make. What changes would you make in your operation to improve it? This is going to take changes on everybody's part and on that. And so what could you change on your operation to?
Well, we've made, in the last year, we've made significant changes in our case management service to do outreach. So I would continue those changes.
What are those changes?
The case managers are now there during the evening. It used to be they were mainly there during the day. Now they're there. There are case managers there 7 days a week until 9 o'clock at night. So, again, we're trying to engage people in services there.
I don't see that improving the neighbors' issues. I mean,
well, the more people, though, that we get off the streets into the shelter engaged in services, the fewer people there are on the streets causing those problems. Again, I know that's not a popular message. People don't want to hear it, but when people aren't on our property, our options are limited. I can do outreach and try to get them into our services. I can keep up with our trash pickups. We're actually going to be putting in some fencing around the property that it will make our boundaries clear. Improving relationships with Beans, I think, helps with that. We're putting in enhancing our job center. I hope that brings more people into employment opportunities. So, you know, we're limited in the funding. Would I like to add 2 more people for a shift? I'd love to do that, but I can't do that. So,
and funding affects almost every solution.
Sure.
And unfortunately, we don't have the authority to tax or spend here. So
right, and we've enhanced our training for our staff. So, but again, those are all things for people that are inside the shelter or that are inside the shelter grounds. They're not for people that are making the choice to not come into the shelter. And I'm not. That's what we're trying to enhance, and that should decrease the impact on the neighborhood.
Do we have any more questions for her? Thank you very much. You may
Thank you.
proceed. Mr. Frost, would you come forward? I got one simple question for you. And I have not asked this question in advance, so you may not have the answer. When you gave us one complaint regarding Beans, regarding Brother Francis Shelter, do you know if there have been any complaints on Beans Cafe?
I don't know.
Do you have a feeling at all on that?
My feeling is that it's minimal to the same extent as it is with Brother Francis Shelter.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Question to staff. This is not a public hearing. Our options at this point are what?
Mr. Chair, as we've discussed previously, there's been no finding of any violation of this conditional use, and modifications to conditional uses have to come from the applicant. So the commission does not have any authority to amend or revoke this particular conditional use. As I suggested over email, clearly the commission desires to be a help in improving a problem, and it was a suggestion that I had that you create a resolution to forward to the Assembly that discusses your investigation into these issues, the lack of commission's authority to take steps to address this, and requesting that others who may have more authority to act in this situation take steps.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. It's been suggested we go to a committee of the whole. Can someone make a motion, please? We have a motion to go to committee of the whole. I need a second. We have a second. We are now in the committee of the whole. Mr. Strike.
Yeah, as we were discussing, I think we should hold off. On any memo at this point until we have more. We have conflicting testimony that we've heard over the past few months, and we've had limited testimony.
I can't hear you very well, and I see lots of people out there. I don't know. Sound system appears weak tonight, people.
Is that better?
Yeah.
I'm thinking that we hold off on the memo at this stage. We can always generate that or make that request in an ensuing meeting. But we've got we've had minimal testimony on both sides, and they conflict. Now, that's not to say we're going to get more testimony on that, but I don't think we don't know what we don't know yet.
How do you expect us to get, fortunately, unfortunately for the parties, we cannot dictate whether or not they come back to make another report in 2 years or 1 year. That's not within our venue. I wish it were. And I wish it was within our venue to make a public hearing. It's not. And I don't know how we would get more information if we don't do anything.
Well, one way to get more information, and from what I'm hearing, is a little bit of a conflict. We've got two entities operating at the same site, both operating, I believe, under two conditional use permits.
Right.
Why aren't those reports combined?
The way I understand, they're under different ownership.
Maybe under different ownership, but they're operating at the same site, that if we could get them on the same cycle as far as the report. I think it took a lot of us by surprise, and we have to dig into the complaints that were lodged against Brother Francis, the one, only happened because it was in the evening. But if it got a call during the day, that wasn't a Brother Francis complaint, that would have been a Beans Cafe complaint.
Well, what is the wish of the body on this subject?
I'll put forth a motion.
Thank you.
That we request that a memo be done to draft a resolution that identifies the issues and problems that have been brought forth to this commission, and look for assistance by staff to facilitate and for a resolution that goes to the assembly and to the administration. Now, leave it at that.
Okay. Commissioner Walker?
Well, just before we get too wadded up in this, I heard a rumor the other day, and I didn't know if maybe one of the staff could elaborate on this, that a nonprofit in Anchorage was recently given something like a multi-million-dollar grant. I heard a number, $5 million, to solve some of the problems that we're talking about here. Can anybody confirm if that's actually happening? That might help to identify some of the issues that Greg is talking about.
Through the chair, Mr. Walker, I have not heard that rumor.
Okay.
Or any substantial facts.
The guy that should know isn't nodding his head, so.
Mr. Robinson, then Ms. Barker.
Excuse me, Ms. Bomalaski may have some knowledge.
And it wasn't us. Fairview Community Council, we attend their meetings monthly, and they applied for a large grant. I think it was $5 million from the state to address this issue, hiring case managers, looking at it comprehensively. So I think Chris Constant, who's the president of the Fairview Community Council, would have that information. I don't think it was all approved this year. I think it's maybe spread out, but that number seems to resonate with what you said. So I'd contact Chris on that. Thank you.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes, thank you. I was just going to relay that information, but also clarify that, you know, by this problem, I think you're talking about more broadly the problem of homelessness and other issues in our community, and not specifically the problem affiliated with this conditional use permit. And I think, you know, it's under that guise that the community was awarded state funds for. And, you know, as we get into specific issues related to Brother Francis, as you all know, my company actually owns the shelter. I wouldn't be participating in any vote, but I would be very much desirous of being engaged in conversations about the issues, the broader issues in our community, because those aren't going away.
This issue is bigger than all of us. Ms. Barker?
I think Mr. Robertson well articulated the comments that I was going to make, so I would just want to echo them.
Thank you. If we made a motion, we could come out of the committee of the whole. Well, okay. We have a motion by Mr. Strike. We have a second by Mr. Walker. Ms. Dean's machine is broken again. On that one, so your motion was to come out of the committee of the whole. So we are now out of the committee of the whole. What is the wish of the body in regard to the report that was given tonight by Brother Francis Shelter? Mr. Strike.
Yes, I would make a motion that we have cause to draft a resolution to the Assembly and the Administration that outlines the issues and the problems that have come before this commission over the past year or so, that, period.
Thank you. Ms. Dean is
I'd like to comment to that motion.
Okay. Ms. Dean has seconded your motion,
okay.
So go ahead and comment.
I'd like to comment to that motion is that this commission has spent an inordinate amount of time on this topic, on this issue, that has come before us through various community councils and from other testimonies that have come before it. And as a result, this inordinate amount of time that we've spent on this, and our hands are tied as far as what we can do and how we can push forward. So in pushing forth that motion to draft this resolution, I believe that this is a way to move the conversation forward. Otherwise, it seems to get bogged down, tied up, and goes around in circles, frustrating those that come before us to testify, as well as many of the commissioners here. And that's, therefore, an effort to push forward this topic. That was the purpose of my motion.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments on this motion? Can we?
Mr. Chair, is this motion or this resolution going to come back before this body before it goes to the Assembly?
I would expect this to, yes, definitely.
Thank you.
I would ask, yes, definitely. I don't know if we have a date yet or not on that one. Can we please vote on that motion? Okay, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You voted over here. Okay. Okay, that motion has passed unanimously. Thank you, everybody on it. It's going to take some work to get that thing going. Go, Mr. Robinson, you want to say something? Okay. All right. Okay, that closes the business on case 2014-0108. We now go to case 2014-0120, a context-sensitive solution, Northern Access UMed District. Do we have a staff report on this, or is this?
Mr. Chair, there is no staff report on this item.
Okay.
Well, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Stuart Osgood. I'm the president of Dowell HKM and the project manager for my firm on the Northern Access to UMed project. I have just a few brief comments to present the project, and then be delighted to take your questions that you may have. My involvement in this project started in 2009 when we started working with the municipality and DOT on a reconnaissance report to start to look at a variety of options to improve access to the north and the east out of the new UMed district. Today our contract is with the Alaska Department of Transportation, but the project is jointly managed between the municipality and DOT. We engaged in an executive steering committee and were able to bring in representatives from Providence, the University of Alaska Anchorage, from APU, South Central Foundation, and Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium to help us with the executive steering of the project, as well as the municipality and DOT. This group met on several occasions and helped with alternative selections, establishing design components, and doing public and stakeholder outreach as we advance the project forward. The diagram in our report that shows land ownership in the area was an interesting thing to unveil to the public. There was a belief that because of the land in the UMed area that was likely to be impacted was virgin land and had yet to be developed, that it was parkland. And showing that land as being largely owned by the University of Alaska statewide system and a bit by APU was kind of one of the first challenges we had in showing the project and the land ownership to the public. The project receives and is currently being funded with state funding. There is no federal funding that's going into this project. So in fiscal year 2009, the legislature gave $1 million to go through a reconnaissance report. That reconnaissance report is shown here. It went out and with a clean slate established 14 separate alternatives that were evaluated to come up and winnow that down to the 4 alternatives that we advanced forward into preliminary engineering and environmental studies. In FY 2013, the legislature gave another $1 million to advance the project, and in FY 14, another $20 million was granted to the project. So the current investment in the project at this point by our state legislature is $22 million. I'd also like to mention that the UMed district is a major success story for our community in many ways. We educate our children there. Many of us get medical attention and help there. And there's just a whole lot going on. Many jobs are created there. And the major institutions have continued to invest in UMed with everything from baby towers to new sports arenas and other things in the UMed district. It's a growing, vibrant area. And of course, with that becomes taxing pressures on our transportation infrastructure program. One of the things I'd like to tell you about also is that early in the project, we did a study to determine how many of the trips that are generated into the UMed district were coming from the north and east. And so we asked the institutions in the area to give us the zip codes of the various, of the students, the patients, the employees, and we broke up a quadrant and determined that between 40 and 50% of the trips come from the north and the east that are coming into the UMed for, again, education, jobs, and medical attention. We have very little access to the north and the east. We have one little strip paved road called UAA Drive that connects up Providence Drive with Northern Lights Boulevard. We continue to pump money into it to try to make it safer and to enhance the capacity, but it really is woefully inadequate to provide access to such a dynamic and growing area. The purpose of the project is to improve that mobility to the north and the east and to take some of the pressure off of the adjacent roadways and facilities and intersection where we see crash rates that are elevated amongst higher than what we would anticipate for similar intersections. When we got into the project, some of the key drivers in this that I want to leave you with tonight as we go forward. There are wetlands with high ecological value that are in the area. some Class A wetlands, some Class B, and some Class C, as well as some uplands. We have very deep organics through the area. That kind of goes with the wetlands. We've done a geotechnical investigation, and at the maximum, we have 18 feet of organics in some places. Our plan is at this point is all of those organic materials will come out, and we'll go to a firm bottom to construct our roadway back up. There are utilities through the area. Now, those were put in some time ago, and so there's second growth stuff that's popped up. And so, but any look at any aerial photograph will show you that the area's been disturbed. We have a sewer line, 42-inch diameter, that runs down through there that's owned by AWW. We have a major gas line. We have both fiber and copper communication lines, and then we have electrical utilities that run overhead, major electrical utilities that belong to CEA. We received a lot of public comments on this project, as you can imagine, and probably read about and maybe even saw on television. And we've enjoyed a high level of sensitivity and participation by the public in helping us mitigate and avoid some of the impacts that the public would like us to avoid. I mentioned to you that we are budget constrained. We have now $20 million to finish this project, and that's going to cover everything from right-of-way to environmental mitigation to design and construction. There's been rumors out there that you may have heard that, well, we'll just drop some additional funds on this. From my perspective and from my client's perspective, we know of no concrete plans to fund this project at any higher level than it currently has. I would mention that the project is 0.7 miles in length, and again, a $20 million price tag. That seems like it should be adequate to construct 0.7 miles. A little bit about our public involvement, and then I'll go on to questions. I want to emphasize with you again, we've had over 300 written comments on this project since we started in 2009. We've had multiple open houses, listening posts. We've attended 12 community council meetings. We had large public meetings that were attended by hundreds of people in February of 2014 and back in August of 2013. We've had a number of meetings with legislators, community activists, et cetera. We had our executive steering committee, and then we formed a trails advisory group to help us with relocation of trails through the area so we can maintain the continuity of the trail system to the best that we can. The comments we received, I break them up into 3 or 4 for you, just as a quick refresher. We love the park, and we don't want the road going in. And that any increase in mobility is not worth destroying the green space. This comes back to that whole land ownership issue and clarifying the issue of just because it's virgin land does not mean it's parkland. And that's been one of the main flashpoints that we've had to bring up with the public is that it is the University of Alaska land, and it is likely that they will continue to develop it with or without this project. As a matter of fact, their master plan suggests so. Others that came forward and said, this is a long overdue project, get on with it. And then if you build the road, do it right. Context sensitive, keep the speeds down, university feel, preserve the trails, all of the stuff that goes into context sensitivity. And then if you build the road, the direct connection is the best. So what you see in front of you is what we termed the orange alignment early on. It is the alignment with 2 separate, with a 2-lane facility, 12-foot travel lanes with in-street bike lanes. This would mimic largely the Elmore Road extension that we constructed several years ago as it extends down through to Abbott Road. It would have a pathway on one side that would be adjacent to the curb and gutter and a separated pathway on the other. We envision it being illuminated for its entire length, lighted, and cleared to reduce the chance of moose vehicle collisions. And we envision about an 80-foot right-of-way being acquired for the project to fit the road in. The project is envisioned to have 3 separate roundabouts, as shown in the graphics that you can see, one down at Providence and Elmore. and then another up near the UAA Fine Arts Building, and yet a third to provide future access into UAA's land as we approach Northern Lights Boulevard. I want to say that the University of Alaska Statewide Lands Group has been very supportive of the project. And has helped offset some of the costs of the enhancements that we're proposing on the project, and has agreed that through the right-of-way process, they would be able to take that into account as we go through and meet with the regents at getting reductions in right-of-way costs, because clearly the University of Alaska is benefiting from the construction of this road, in that we are constructing something that otherwise they would have to do on their own. So with the beep, I think that's my indication that I should probably stop and take your questions. I do want to say that this has been a great project. It's been a great process. It's fun to be involved with projects that the public cares about and that they show up for. Often they show up because they're passionate and they care about our community, and they've added great value to where we've ended up to date. And there's a lot of work to be done in the future, and we welcome their comments and involvement in the project. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dean?
Through the chair, Mr. Osgood, would you be available possibly to do a work session so we can talk about some of the issues that are going to take more time than we all have at the moment?
Certainly.
I don't know if anybody else in the commission would be interested, and if staff has scheduling available, but how would the chair feel about that?
I'm going to wait to hear other questions, but I don't have a problem with it. Anything else, Ms. Dean? Mr. Walker?
I feel pretty comfortable at this point with what I've been given, and I don't feel like a work session is necessary for my needs anyway.
Mr. Robinson?
Yeah, I had a question as to whether comments that Commissioner Spring had put together. He's not here tonight, but he took particular interest in the report and put us about a page and a half together. Did you receive that?
I did.
I'll kind of let that speak for itself, and then maybe ask, how at this stage in the process you handle those types of comments. I mean, you're here for just an informational item, and we're not taking action here. And I know you come back at a later time, but maybe you could kind of walk all of us through that. But I wanted to piggyback one of the points he mentioned, which is kind of the guiding documents and the lack of a couple of the key documents that we would normally see, those of us that are sort of land use planners on this body. Clearly we have a UMED district plan that's undergoing a rewrite. We have an existing adopted plan that basically says no road. We're going to have this sort of combined campus situation. So it's not clear to me, how the interface with the land use is. You've talked about a couple of the access points. I'm assuming these are going to be controlled access points. There's at the roundabouts, and that's going to be the only place. I'm looking at this image here and seeing, a road through the black spruce, and anticipating that it probably won't always be like that, and yet it's hard to envision what the campus, looks like. And yet we're putting this in there for campus reasons, not throughput reasons. So I wonder if you can talk about that interface with the institution's planning efforts, as well as the district planning effort from a land use standpoint, and how that works with the transportation planning effort.
Right. We've worked extensively with both UAA and with the University of Alaska Statewide Land System to put a facility and to provide access points that are consistent with their long-range plan and their master plan for both APU and for the University of Alaska. And there's been a give and take back and forth as far as where they want to get access and how many access points they want versus how we want our facility to operate and how close it can be to Northern Lights. So what we show here now at a 25% level is the result of numerous meetings and discussions that have gone on with those two institutions, but particularly those two institutions, to come up with a plan that seems to fit with their master planning and their current desires going forward.
If I could, Mr. Chair, I'm sort of intrigued by this notion of this road providing access, and Mr. Spring sort of catches it here when he says the classification as an arterial sort of indicates that it's more than just a local serving road, that it is in fact to some degree designed to serve through traffic. And there's this notion here that we're only going to build 2 lanes and keep the speeds low because we're going to foster this campus feel, or it's not going to become this major arterial like Northern Lights and Tudor. And my experience living here is the overall regional transportation needs often trump those other, the more localized land use or neighborhood needs. And I want to know, how is it long-term that we know after we build this thing and suddenly we think, oh, it's not handling enough, or we've induced more traffic, and several years down the road we're already looking, okay, it's going to be a 4-lane, it's going to be another through lane road. How does that fit? How do we just say this is what it's going to be and we're okay with that? Do the transportation numbers support that? Do we have the political, is it long term, it just doesn't, it seems a little precarious, I know, from people in the community that this is all they're getting.
Sure. So let's see where to start with that. The traffic volumes currently on UAA Drive, let me start with that, about 9,000 vehicles a day on that little street. The traffic model shows that this roadway facility, as constructed, attracts roughly the same amount of traffic. So it will provide another 9,000 trips a day access to the north and the east. There was always a concern by people that, gee, we want to meter out all of the South Anchorage people who want to go to the valley, and we don't want them to use this road. And the best way to do that is to do things that we've already accomplished as a community, like putting in Martin Luther King Boulevard and connecting it into Boniface. It's always easier to attract traffic to a better place than to drive them out with barriers. Now, barriers like depressed speeds and roundabouts and speed humps. So what we have, I think, is we've made significant investments in Elmore, in Abbott Road, in Martin Luther King Boulevard, in Boniface to have that be the preferred route north-south through our community. That doesn't mean that we want everybody in the UMed district to then come out on Tudor Road and try to get out to Boniface, which is what they're doing now. So we've pushed them out into our little streets because we haven't given them any decent opportunity going north-south if you work at Providence Hospital or ANTHC or other locations. So we feel that what we've got here is a very balanced approach. We essentially are providing another relief valve that will be at least as effective as UAA Drive. It's not going to attract traffic off of Boniface or off of Tudor, but it does provide that important link to the north. Cut-through traffic. That's always a tough one to define, but let's just say that we say how many trips are currently using UAA Drive that do not originate or are destined from the UMed district. And all the numbers that we've collected through a variety of sources suggest about 20% of those 9,000 trips a day are just traversing the UMed district. They don't have any reason to be starting there or ending there. And for some reason, they believe that's the best route for them to take. I can't imagine why, because I avoid that street like the plague, and I live in Rogers Park, because I know what it's like at shift change. But if we take those same numbers and say that we're going to receive about another 20% are going to be cut through, I think that's probably a reasonable guess. So you can say, gee, 20% is cut through. I guess the other way to look at that is to say 80% is not cut through, and that may be as good as we can do. Okay. It's very tough to meter people and say, you got to show a swipe card or you can't use the street.
No, I fully know, but at the same time, we do induce problems by overbuilding, and I think we have a pretty special place there. Final question, if I may. It's always been a pet peeve of mine on new road projects that we build either pathways or sidewalks that are not detached. And so I wonder the rationale for, I know you have one detached, but why not have both of them detached, given the need for snow storage?
Yeah, there's probably many points to that. One of them is has to do with right-of-way and wetlands impacts. And right-of-way, the value of the right-of-way out here is probably going to run around $20 to $22 a square foot. So there's a cost component to it. The Corps also looks at that, and they typically are only looking at it with blinders on of less wetlands impact, less wetlands impact. So we may have a tough job even selling a buffer on one side of the road. And we do have to go through a very in-depth permitting process with the Corps of Engineers to justify our cross-section. But you're speaking to sympathetic ears.
Anything else, Mr. Robinson? Ms. Barker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you comment, please, on the implications of the no project alternative?
The implications, as far as did we analyze a no-build alternative going forward? At the reconnaissance level, we did look at solving the entire UMED problem without a construction project with a traffic demand management system, buses and increased ridership and other things. And it was found to be ineffective at meeting the purpose and need of the project. The Corps of Engineers will be looking through their wetlands permitting process at a no-build alternative, but we had a purpose and need that was given to us contractually is to solve a problem, and no-build did not achieve that objective. So unlike an EIS process, we haven't been through that, but certainly through the Corps of Engineers process, it will be.
Anything further?
And I think that's where I'm going next. I'm very familiar with the process associated with federal funding. I understand that this project will be constructed solely with non-federal dollars. Could you then please discuss the environmental review process that is attached to that? You mentioned the Corps of Engineers.
Yes, we're preparing a permit application for the Corps that will contain all of the relevant information that typically would be included in an environmental assessment. That will include flora, fauna, wetlands, air, noise, archaeology. I'm probably missing some others, but all of the various chapters that would be included in an environmental assessment. It's not going to be called an environmental assessment. It will be called our permit application, but it will largely follow the format of a NEPA environmental assessment.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Spories?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for the staff through the chair, and my question is that we're reviewing this plan at a 25% according to Mr. Osgood, and my question is, and maybe a little clarification on why there's no action to be taken, as there seems to be significant public involvement. All the agencies that were involved are on board with this going forward, so I'm just, if you could give a little clarification.
Through the chair, Mr. Sporhays, the Assembly adopted the context-sensitive solutions process in 2008, I believe, and this came out of a very contentious redevelopment project along Strawberry Road where there was kind of some very rigid, this is what we always do, and the community wanted something different, and so as a kind of a, here's what we learned from that, we, actually AMATS, I think, developed this context-sensitive solutions policy, and it was adopted by the city, and it sets up a 3-stage process for these types of projects. The first phase of the process is the concept report, and this is provided to the Planning and Zoning Commission as an informational item only. The second phase of the process is the design study report. You will see this. It comes back before the commission, and the commission does get to take action on that report. And then the third phase of and I believe the design study report, and perhaps Mr. Osgood could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's about 35% design.
That's correct.
And then at 65% design is the third phase of the project, and that is often called plans in hand, and those are more detailed designs, drawings regarding landscaping, pedestrian facilities, that sort of thing, and that goes to the Urban Design Commission for review. So it's a 3-step process that has been set up through the adoption of this policy. And again, the concept report is provided as information only without any action required.
So for clarification, it says there's no action required, but is there the possibility to make a motion that we could approve the plan as it is today at 25%?
The commission has no authority over this item, no authority to accept or reject. So should the commission wish to indicate support, I suppose you could make a motion indicating support or some other thing, but you have no regulatory authority over this information or this concept report.
Mr. Voorhees, I also am challenged by that determination. I mean, we sit here, they spend thousands of dollars preparing this beautiful report. We have landscape architects and engineers come forward, and, you know, I don't know how to handle that. I'm challenged by it. I don't have a solution.
To the chair, could I make a motion to support what we've seen so far presented by Dow HCAM at this point? And
Why don't we let's get through this, and you'll have the opportunity here shortly. But I'd like to get all the commissioners have an opportunity to speak and ask their questions, and then we'll come back to that. Okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Steen.
I withdraw my request for a work session.
Okay, thank you. Any commissioners have any other questions? Seeing and hearing none, and seeing none on the screen, I would like to put forth a comment that I too am challenged greatly by how we take 80 foot of right-of-way to build 24 foot of road. It seems to me as a community that we are building trails and occasionally putting a road alongside them. And I really, you know, we've got a lot of trails in this community. We should have trails, but I'm challenged why we have bikeways or multi-use trails on either side and a bike lane in the traffic. We eat up an awful lot of right-of-way. And at $22 a square foot times 0.7 of a mile, that's quite a lot of money. And I am challenged by that. I don't think, I mean, I am in favor of needing the trails, and I am in favor of needing the cars, but, you know, I don't think it's going to be so crowded that the bikes and the pedestrians can't share. And maybe if the bicycles need to slow down occasionally, maybe that's not a bad deal. Mr. Robinson will object here shortly, but that's okay. We have this debate frequently on it. I'm also concerned, I live near Huffman with 3 roundabouts on it. You know, it's fun to drive. Solemn skiing in the middle of the winter. This is going to ultimately become a major access point to the hospitals. And I wonder if there's been any concern on how those are going to impact the time to get people to the hospitals. I don't mind a roundabout. They do move a lot of traffic. I think Dowling is much quicker to get through now today with a roundabout than it ever was with the signal. But I don't know if they're always a perfect solution on that. If we have no further questions, and in light of staff's comments, Mr. Voorhees, I said you'd have the opportunity to make a motion. Now's your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hang on one second. Do you have anything to say in rebuttal, Mr. Osgood? Or not rebuttal as much as, you know, you heard some comments. You want to respond to them?
Regarding the bike lanes and the right-of-way and other things, I do have responses, but it's probably not worth the debate at this point.
Okay. We respect that. Does staff have anything to say? Anything further before we?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Voorhees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to make a motion to approve the Northern Access UMED plan as presented here at 25%, as all agencies involved are supportive. As Mr. Osgood has pointed out, In addition, finding the fact, there's been significant public involvement to get to this point. The agencies involved, for the record, is UAA, Providence Health and Services, South Central Foundation, Alaska Department of Transportation, APU, and Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. They're all in agreement. And I think that's my motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a second? If your machine isn't working, you want a second, wave your hand. Mr. Voorhees, you made a good motion, but it dies for a lack of a second on that one. Mr. Osgood, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Voorhees, will you do the consent agenda now? Awfully late, 1 hour, and we just got to the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the consent agenda, I make a motion to approve the submitted consent agenda, items A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and J.
Thank you. Can I have a second to that motion? Ms. Dean seconds it with a defective machine.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am?
3A is also part of the consent agenda.
Okay. Thank you for pointing that out. Does anyone want to pull anything from the consent agenda?
Yes, I'd like to pull 3A.
Okay, 3A is pulled from the consent agenda. Is there anything else to be pulled from the consent agenda? Going once, going twice. So the consent agenda is approved with the exception of 3A, which is case 2014-0094. On that one, may we have a staff report on case 2014-0094?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sears Roebuck and Company seeks approval of an amendment to an existing large retail establishment site plan reviewed under the old code. The Sears Mall is a large retail establishment which is deemed to have an approved site plan as it existed prior to May 8, 2001, the date of adoption of the large retail establishment standards. Thus, changes to the Sears Mall are reviewed under AMC 2155-130, which states that the Commission shall apply the standards set out in 2153-20 in a manner proportionate to the extent of the expansion, reconstruction, renovation, or remodeling proposed. The cost of compliance with those standards shall not exceed 10% of the cost of the reconstruction. The petitioner is renovating a portion of the Sears store. The Nordstrom rack and future tenant space is located at the north portion of the existing Sears store. The proposed renovation of the building facade does not increase the floor area of the mall as the renovation takes place within the existing space, and the project includes the addition of a 683 square foot loading dock and screened trash receptacle along the north side of the existing Sears store. Cost of compliance, the Commission has the authority to require improvements that do not exceed 10% of the overall cost of the renovation. The petitioner has submitted estimated costs for the improvements as follows. The total cost of the renovation is $334,600. The applicant indicated this amount is for the loading dock addition and not interior renovations. 10% of this amount is $33,460. As noted in the attached department memo from 2009, the goal of the department is to use this 10% dollar figure to work on bringing the expansion of the new structure and the existing structure towards compliance with the architectural standards, while also trying to bring improvements to the site. Generally, the sites in Anchorage are lacking in areas of pedestrian, vehicle safety, landscaping, pedestrian access, and building architecture. The non-motorized coordinator is requesting a pedestrian connection to Northern Lights Boulevard at the westerly driveway, but considering that there is a pedestrian connection at the easterly driveway and the fact that there is no mid-block crossing of Northern Lights between the Seward Highway all the way down to Denali Street, staff is recommending improvements of the landscaping along Northern Lights Boulevard along the building frontage and providing walkway striping in the drive aisle to the east entry doors. Conformance to 2155-130 and 2153-20, just to run through, is the overhang awning on the east-facing facade meets the requirements of AMC 2150-320P1. The applicant must replace it with a non-conforming or with a conforming alternative if they remove it. The applicant could stay in conformity if they remove less of the awning along the east elevation Nordstrom Rack storefront. New landscaping replaces existing landscaping that is being removed. New entries and new loading dock meet the standards, and the new window on the north side is an improvement. But otherwise, the changes to the building and the site either move away from compliance, the removal of the overhang awning, or make no significant change towards compliance. Given the intense commercial quality of the surrounding property, the requirement to vary roof lines and heights should not have a greater negative impact on the surrounding properties. The Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities has expressed concern over existing trees blocking the driver's ability to see traffic as they exit onto Northern Lights Boulevard. Landscaping that is within the ADOT site triangles must be removed. The department is asking that any trees that are removed, found to need to be removed or replaced on a one-to-one basis. Other visual and noise buffers, given the surrounding uses, major roads, there should be little noise generated on the site that could potentially impact nearby land uses. The new loading area is partially buffered by a screening wall, and as noted earlier, staff recommends adding landscaping along that Northern Lights Boulevard, which would further screen the loading area. The petition narrative states there are no plans for any outdoor storage or display areas as part of this project, and snow will be plowed and removed from the site. The screened trash receptacle enclosure proposed on the north side of the building will feature architectural elements of the building to tie it together as stated, and the department recommends once again that landscape along the Northern Lights will help screen this loading dock area.
Do we have any questions for staff? Thank you. Is the applicant here to testify?
I actually, Mr. Chair, I do.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I'm not sure that that maybe there's more to that presentation, but
There's well, to finalize it, with that being said, the division recommends approval of the amended site plan review for the Sears store tenant improvements for Nordstrom Rack located on the north side of the Sears Mall, subject to conditions 1 through 7 found in the staff packet, page 10 and 11.
so if I may, Mr. Chair. So understanding that this is an existing big box or a facility that was in place before the ordinance, there's a limitation to what can be done, and typically what's done is, you know, the areas around the improvements, some landscaping things, I think, as staff goes through their narrative, those are sort of some of the improvements that are looked for as part of that 10%. One of the things that I've noticed over the years, and at first I thought it was sort of a temporary thing, but it shows up on the aerial as well, but as you drive down Benson, you'll notice, I think it looks like on the aerial, about six Connexes that are there in the parking lot. And I thought they were there maybe during a temporary improvement at one point, but they seem to be staying. And one of the conditions for outdoor storage and display is, it says pretty clearly, commercial trailers, shipping containers, similar equipment used for transporting merchandise shall remain on the premises only as long as required for loading and unloading operations and shall not be maintained on the premises for storage purposes. Now, I understand that these are not part of this particular project, but I wonder if it came up in conversation, you know, given that this is something that could be asked of a petitioner to deal with, and perhaps what staff's solution, and I'll ask them later what their suggestion on how to bring the site into conformance related to those storage containers.
Through the chair, Mr. Robinson, it was not brought up. The intermodal containers, I believe those are on the Old Seward and Benson side. It was merely looked at on the Northern Lights side as far as improvements and upgrades. In the new code, however, intermodal shipping containers are addressed for the future. The commercial district Connex units shall be located to the rear of all principal structures or meet screening, siding, and roofing requirements, or including painted to match the color scheme of the principal building. And it talks about construction, loading and unloading the Connex unit, or during construction exempt from this section, as long as the Connex unit is removed promptly at the finish of the loading or unloading of the construction activity. I'm not aware of what the status is with those Connex, if they're being used currently for a construction project going on.
Thank you. Is it your position, though, that if they're not for a specific construction purpose, they're a permitted accessory use to this facility?
To my knowledge, I would have to do some research, but I believe it's a permitted accessory use in the B3.
Although current code would require that they be screened in some way. So perhaps the use is allowed, but the characteristics of use are at play?
Perhaps.
Thank you.
I also question on that building, what is the rear of that building? I don't know how we even define that, but I agree with your line of questioning, Commissioner Robinson. If they were there for an active construction project, I would support them, but to have them sit there, been there a while on that one. Do we have any other questions for staff on this? Is the applicant here to make a statement?
Hello, my name is Michelle Ritter. I'm with Dow HKM. With me this evening is Tim Radnauer with RIM Architects. He's the design architect. As far as the connexes go, it is our understanding that they are part of ongoing tenant improvements. So I think it was in the last 3 or 4 years, there actually have been different improvements to the various entryways. But I'm not 100% positive, but that is our understanding. But they're not affiliated with the Nordstrom Rack project. Other than that, we've read the staff's report, and we agree with the conditions of approval and are here to answer any questions unless Tim would like to add anything.
Thank you. You have 9 minutes for rebuttal here.
Okay.
Do we have any questions for the applicant? I have 2 questions for the applicant. And these are all, we're having a war up here on this thing. And one more move and the microphone will end up with the audience, I can promise you that. The loading dock on the north side of the building. There is a sidewalk currently where that loading dock is going to go, providing access up and down that parking area. On page 34, we find that the loading dock will have no impact on existing pedestrian access. This maybe would be more appropriate for staff, but it would seem to me that that loading dock does disturb the access on the north side of the building.
The interior circulation on the lot, it does impact that circulation as along the building. There are no longer entryways or egress. It's all egress from the new tenant spaces. There wouldn't be any entry access along that side of the building currently.
So if I parked on that side of the building,
You would go around to the east side of the building.
so I would say that this improvement does impact the pedestrian access to the building.
Interior lot pedestrian access, yes.
Well, I'm not talking about the sidewalk,
Well,
the exterior.
that's
I'm
fine.
talking against the building.
That's correct.
Thank you. Next question, then I will go to Ms. Barker. Do I have access to the mall, inside the mall from this building without going outside?
Not from, you do through the Sears store. Sears will be the only tenant who has access to the mall from this project.
Can I walk from Nordstrom's through Sears to the mall then?
No.
So my question was carefully put, that can I walk from Nordstrom's into the mall? And you said yes, and now you're saying no.
I'm not, the answer is no. You cannot go from inside the Nordstrom store into the central access of the mall. You would have to go outside through the Sears store or around the building to access the mall.
Under community spaces, we find that there are a variety of community spaces provided at the Mall of Sears. The food court provides ample seating area as well as there are seating and gathering spaces throughout the mall. But those aren't accessible to this space.
That is a true statement, although they would be able to enjoy the spaces, but they would have to go into a separate entrance.
They'd have to go out of the space
And into
in a
another
different
space.
space to get there. Ms. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also have some concerns about the pedestrian access. This is a winter city. This is the northern side of the building. A good deal of what would be the striping that's recommended would probably not even be visible under the typical snow cover and plowing patterns we currently have. I would like to see something a little bit better that would provide for more protected pedestrian access, particularly since people are going to have to go kind of a roundabout way if they actually want to get into the mall.
Yeah, I don't know how they get in.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to figure that out, too, and I'm trying to figure out what happens to Sears in this. Are they going to accrete on down into what's kind of the existing mall space to make up for the square footage they're giving up for the Nordstrom Rack? How does this all work?
To talk in general terms, the Sears store is condensing into a smaller space. They're accomplishing that by internet sales, by reducing product lines that aren't doing well in this market, and generally carrying less stock.
I'm delighted as anybody to see Nordstrom Rack come to Anchorage. And maybe because of that, I'm really concerned about the access, about the volume of people that are going to be coming to that center that we don't currently have now in a parking and pedestrian environment that is really not very conducive for people on foot.
Anything further, Ms. Parker? Mr. Walker.
So I'm hearing my fellow commissioners ask about the access issues. You haven't really spoken to this, but I've heard that maybe there's an entitlement issue that is the reason that there isn't an internal access to the common area of the mall from this space. Is that the case?
It's more of a suitability. It's tenant driven rather than any infighting or bickering among.
So Nordstrom Rack does not want access from the mall.
That's correct, and
Okay.
because they like to have one secure entry and egress.
Okay.
If they had two, they would have to have additional point of sale stations as well as more security.
It's understandable. Thank you.
Mr. Voorhees.
Thank you, Chair. Just curious, what's the layout and the access in other Nordstrom Rack locations? Do they have single entrances or do they have dual entrances?
That's their preferred method. Obviously, the only other Nordstrom Rack that I've personally visited was in Seattle. It's in a basement. There are two access points, and it's probably not their preferred.
Okay, thank you.
Fire code in this building, I bet, would dictate at least two exits.
Absolutely, but they're secured so that there's
They're
an
alarmed.
alarm.
They're alarmed.
They're alarmed.
Do So is this area only going to have one access?
One entry and point of sale.
So which is the access there on the east side is the only exit or only access, or where's?
That's the only entry, correct. There are additional exits around the perimeter.
Ms. Barker's comment regarding Winter City, you sure have a long walk to get into that building if you wanted to.
As is the case with most shopping destinations or shopping mall type destinations. And there is a near continuous canopy that surrounds the building.
Yeah,
Yes.
now,
yes.
not now.
Yes, it will. The existing canopy is maintained.
Mr. Voorhees, were you done? Okay.
I am, thank you.
Mr. Strike.
Yeah, my question is, back to school time, mom drops the kids off at the rack, she goes shopping to Cars. Meet me back at Cars in half an hour. Kids go in, do whatever shopping, 13, 14 years old. How are they going to get to Cars?
As it's currently designed, they would have to exit the Nordstrom rack and walk outside to get into the cars.
And walk outside where? Through the parking lot because there's no sidewalk? Through the past the trucks that could be driving in, putting in for your loading dock? So they're going to walk past the loading dock in the parking lot. So they're going to be walking behind Cars, not in front of them, behind them in the parking lot, in order to access the mall.
Or
Anybody
through the
else have a
adjacent,
problem with this?
or through the adjacent retailers.
So we're going to put a sign up and say, cut through. I mean, this is a safety issue. And I tell you, there's going to be a lot of 12, 13, and 14-year-old young kids loving to have Nordstroms here. And tell you what, I'm all for it. How are they going to get to the mall? How are they going to get from the mall to the Nordstrom rack?
Well, not to be argumentative, but if I follow your logic through, if their mother went to Walgreens, they would still have to cross the traffic path. It's similar, but they're not the same.
No.
Yeah.
Are you done, Mr. Strike? Mr. Voorhees.
Thank you. Could you confirm what the distance is from the entrance to Nordstrom Rack to the mall? Exactly how far these people would have to walk around the corner to a main entrance? Approximately.
451 feet.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's from the entrance shown to the corner of 75, 226 down the backside, and 150 feet back to the mall.
Thank you. What page are you on, Mr. Chair?
A101.
Thank you.
It's just a plan with that. Okay, do we have any more questions for the applicant?
Yes.
Go, Mr. Strike.
Do you have the handout that you've given us, C101?
Yes.
Okay. And if I look at that on the right-hand side, I see where removing the curb and the gutters. So as I'm looking at this, on the right-hand side is where the main entrance will be?
That's correct.
Okay, so they're not just walking in the parking lot, they're walking in the street to get to the parking lot.
There's a sidewalk.
This is,
The street coming on, the entrance coming in off of Northern Lights Boulevard, going south, right in the front of the building. I'm going to call that the street. I'm going to call that the main parking access, not a parking lot.
If you look at C102, which is the plan, C101 is the demolition plan.
Okay.
There is a sidewalk. Well,
So now we have a sidewalk.
Yeah.
That goes where?
It just wraps around the building, but it does allow them, once they get through that drive access, which is, I think, why staff has requested that we do stripe that, and recognizing that it's not a raised sidewalk, but it is improving the situation.
Mr. Strike, are you finished?
I'm finished.
Ms. Dean?
Through the chair, on C-102, if I'm walking alongside the building, I'm going to hit the truck dock and the building that is attached. There is no sidewalk around the side of the building. You have to walk in front of the truck dock. You have to walk to be on a sidewalk. You have to cross the parking lot and walk along the street to stay out of the path of traffic, and walk along Northern Lights and then recross at the far end and then walk along the building then. But there is a long stretch where there is no sidewalk alongside the north side of the building, where the truck bay is and where the pop-out is for the truck bay. So please don't say that there's a walkway around the building. There isn't. It is a public sidewalk on Northern Lights that people would have to use. And
Agreed.
I just wanted to clarify that this is not the best situation for people to walk around.
I have a question for staff, if there are no other questions. Handicap access. We're down now to 5 handicap access. All the handicap access on the west side don't do any good. Does that meet code? I mean, this is the...
Well, Mr. Chair, if you're talking about the east side, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There is one on the north side there, proposed handicap parking sign. However, I think Erica McConnell might state is I believe we have to look at the mall as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Odell. Mr. Chair, if I could just add that there are no code-specific requirements that about the location of the accessible spaces. But I would note the ones that are on the west side, there are 3 tenant spaces on the west side. So there's the new tenant space for Nordstrom's Rack, and then there's 3 additional tenant spaces on the west side. And I think
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I remember seeing those walls there. Thank you. I thought I had been dinged that my accessible spaces had to be the closest spaces to the door. I think I've had that issue with the city before.
I guess what I mean is in a mall situation, there's no requirement that you evenly space them at the various mall doors.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sporhees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I was reviewing this package, I was relatively comfortable with it, and the reason why is when I look at the rendering that was provided by RIM right after A202, is on the east elevation, shows on the very bottom, it shows the Nordstrom Rack where it's going in, and then it showed a revised entry for Sears. I don't understand why, to meet some of the concerns of the body, why patrons or customers of the mall couldn't go into Sears and then access the main mall and get all the way down to cars. And as long as there's some kind of, barricade or some kind of barrier to prevent children, clients from walking out to the right along the loading area, I think that would be met. Is that correct?
That's correct. The walk that's adjacent to the building that dead ends at the loading dock would dead end at an exit-only door or an access door to the loading dock. The Sears entry is upgraded, both to renovate the existing exterior of the building as a whole.
I apologize. Is the revised entry, is this a new entry into Sears, or is this the existing one?
It's an existing entry.
Okay, and it'll have a sidewalk from Sears down to
That's correct.
to where Nordstrom Rack is? Thank you.
And the walk is covered along the extent.
Okay, do we have any additional questions of the applicant? Mr. Robinson?
Yeah, just that's fine by me. Is there any sort of weird deal, since you have to go through Sears, that the hours of operation of Sears would be different otherwise than the hours of operation of the mall and Nordstrom's, or are they the same hours of operation?
They should be the same.
Okay, thanks.
Any further questions? Mr. Walker, then Mr. Strike.
This is just more of curiosity than anything, but I work in the commercial real estate industry. I've heard about this project. I've kind of, you hear rumors. Was there originally a plan to have some sort of interior access to the mall, or to provide a through fare for people to walk outside and then walk through and get into the mall? I mean, it seems like I heard that with some small shop space or something like that.
There were options discussed. The property owner to the west would have preferred that. We did look at a scheme that did that, but ultimately it doesn't fit with Nordstrom's operating style.
Anything further, Mr. Walker? Mr. Strike?
As you represent Sears as a petitioner for this, will Sears have any hesitancy in promoting this type of access from the mall through the Sears store to this store?
I don't represent Sears in this capacity, but in retail, traffic is traffic. And I would highly doubt that they would have any issue with
Give me something
additional.
stronger. Give me something stronger.
Everybody who walks through a store's door is a potential customer. There's absolutely no reason why they would not want more people coming through their store to get to other stores.
Done, Mr. Strike? Ms. Bean?
Through the chair, I have a question of staff. I have kind of a process question. What was the square footage of this particular space going to be? It's under 40,000 square feet, correct? It's like 33,000 or something?
Through the chair, let me take a look real quick here. Okay. 34,956 approximately square feet of store area. And then there's 3 future tenant spaces of 3,801 each. So you're correct.
Are we approving all of those spaces, or are we just approving the Nordstrom Rack space?
We're approving the addition of the loading dock.
Okay.
Not any of the interior renovations. Just
So
the addition of the loading dock and the trash enclosure.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yep.
Can I clarify Mr. Strike's previous question?
Please go ahead.
So Sears will ultimately have to buy off on the design, and they have. So by virtue of their buy off, I believe that they have supported the closed off entry. I don't know if that helps clarify your original question.
We can put a sign coming out that says access the mall through Sears. I'm going to be heartbroken if some kid gets hit in the parking lot by a truck after this discussion here in the wintertime or whenever it happens. I'm going to be absolutely sick if that happens. So I'm trying to find a way to help promote this.
Right.
Access the mall through Sears.
I think that we could definitely probably talk to the client about some type of signage that helps with the wayfinding to let people know internally before they leave Nordstrom Rack how to get back into the mall and to Sears and then to the general mall. Yes.
We are routinely criticized of not being a good northern city, and our design is criticized of not being good northern design. And if we could provide an internal circulation and not force the people outside, I think that is a step in the right direction in Northern Design. And, you know, it's not Sears and Nordstrom's or you. It's trying to accommodate, you know, our client, our constituents here. Ms. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the goal is to, in fact, as Mr. Strike was saying, to funnel folks out of the Nordstrom rack into the mall via Sears, the piece that's really missing here is a continuous overhang and climate protection between the two spaces. What would be your reaction to a request to extend the overhang so it would be continuous between the two store entrances?
There are existing overhangs which are intended to stay between the two entrances.
But it's not continuous. It would end before it got to the Nordstrom rack entrance.
It's the short distance of the Nordstrom rack entrance. You're correct. It's not continuous. I apologize.
So could we make it continuous?
Ms. Barker, do you have anything else? Mr. Voorhees, then Mr. Walker, and then we're going to get to the issue here. Mr. Voorhees.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is more of a kind of a comment to follow up on what you said about being a prudent northern city and our design. Has there been any research or anything that has been done to be maybe put an enclosed causeway in between the two stores for the wintertime or to control access and control the direction of clients coming in and out? If you're following me on that, just basically in addition to extending the overhang, maybe putting up some kind of divider between the sidewalk and the parking lot to also maybe piggyback on Mr. Strike's sincerity in promoting safety.
I'm not sure I follow, other than through the existing.
Is it basically take where the existing sidewalk is and extend the overhang, but in addition to extending the overhang, you put some kind of divider up between the sidewalk and the parking lot?
Kind of like a natural pantry in front of the rounded area where there's the eatery, like for people to sit outside and eat.
Well,
and there's kind of the barrier so that
yes.
they're not right there in the parking lot.
Yes, something along that lines that kind of directs traffic to the entrance at Sears.
Clear. It has not been explored to date.
I've got big red signs jumping at me saying that exiting might be an issue because you can't exit one space through another space. And it seems to me that the fire marshal might be excited over that.
Yeah.
Staff is telling me I can't comment like that, but I would see that as an issue.
I'd also worry slightly, depending on the material that was used, about safety issue for people hiding behind that wall.
Yeah.
So that would be an immediate concern that comes to mind.
Sure, I was thinking some kind of maybe a glass enclosure or something that's, that metal requirements.
Are you done, Mr. Voorhees?
I am, thank you.
Mr. Walker, then Mr. Strike.
I have a question for staff through the chair, just kind of speaking to some of these concerns. I think I'm probably less worried about it than others are here, but this project, clearly Nordstrom Rack is their preferred arrangement is consistent with the more contemporary development style in retail these days, which is more of a power center where each store has its own exterior door and storefront, and you walk outside to access the other stores. Interior malls are obviously less popular these days, but in this case, clearly there's a pedestrian access issue. You've got this site that was developed 50 years ago, and things have grown up around it. Now we're trying to solve this problem. So if this was a brand new project today with the big box issues that are in play, are these issues something that would be a problem? I mean, would you guys have to to solve this problem if this was a brand-new project today?
If this was coming under the new design review, then landscaping, pedestrian access, yes, it would be a big issue that would have to be resolved.
Okay. So the reason that it hasn't been a focus in this review is because they're only, your ability to enforce these issues is limited to the 10%. Is that right? Or?
Through the chair, Mr. Walker. Yes, well, we look at vehicular and pedestrian safety improvements, blending in the exterior of the old facility, new facility, landscaping, drainage improvements. So, like we said, we felt that with the sidewalk striping to get from the Northern Lights sidewalk to the building, as well as landscaping improvements, the department felt that that was the best use of the 10%.
Thank you.
Mr. Walker, then Mr. Strike, then Mr. Robinson.
Thank you. One of the issues I'm having here is that on one hand, you want the advantage of being in the mall by virtue of how you're counting the handicap space, saying it's the totality of the mall that counts as the handicap spots. But then you say, well, we're a standalone store with no access other than through that one store. So which is it? You want to be part of the mall and be consistent with the mall environment, or do you want to stand alone? Because you're arguing both sides and wanting both sides of the equation here. Now, I'm lumping you in as being part of the mall. That's how it's been presented, and we'll get over the handicap spaces. But if we're going to get past that, we have an access problem. And that's what I'm not past yet.
Thank you, Mr. Strike. A bunch of people fell off, so now we're down to Mr. Voorhees.
Thank you, Mr. Strike. My question is for the future tenants in their 3,800 square foot retail spaces that are designed for future tenants, and they will not have access to the mall either, correct? It'll be one point of sale, one entrance in a similar fashion that Nordstrom Rack is doing. So my comment and / question is, it seems like, at least on this side of the mall, this is the direction that this is going, and maybe away from internal malls, as Mr. Walker pointed out, because it's not as favorable as it has been in the past. So it might not just be a condition that we have to approve for Nordstrom Rack, but for other future tenants as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And as each future tenant comes before you to do additions, it will incrementally get pushed more into compliance. So I think I would just like to remind everybody that this is an existing site. We're adding a loading dock. By virtue of the size of the store by itself, we would not be required to become before you. It would be a permitted use in this zoning district without all the design criteria. So we're trying to better the site and add a more viable business to it, and working with some of the challenges that currently exist. And we recognize that it's not the most, if we were designing the site today, this is not how we would design it. That's not, so none of your comments are wasted on us.
Thank you.
Mr. Voorhees, are you done?
I am, thank you.
Mr. Robinson.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. One is, if this was a standalone use, it would have enough retail to generate by itself the big box review. So we're kind of, they're sort of limited in part because they're part of the mall, even though if they were standalone, they'd have all the big box requirements if they were coming in new. I think Mr. Walker sort of nailed it for me. I think, you almost have this transitioning mall that's going external, and yet the two additions that are external are being disrupted by this loading dock. And so I think that's where and the loading dock is and the addition itself is in fact making things worse than what exists today. So I think that's my problem. It's not just that they're only doing the 10% and they're limited. It's the nature of the project itself is sort of creating this issue. And I'll concur with you. It's a design. You're balancing an existing building that can't figure out which side is the front side. I mean, they're not making it better. With clearly what a tenant desires and what they want for their programming. So I'm a bit I'm a bit confused as to how, if I almost never step foot in that mall, but there might be a reason now to step foot in the mall, and maybe there's a couple of new stores that have reason to step foot in the mall. But the way to get to those new stores is not through Sears to get back around to the other one, but it's through the outside and around to the side. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where else you put the loading dock to service the store.
Neither do we.
I have been told I spend most of my time out of the box. Do we need a loading dock?
Yes, the client needs a loading dock.
Okay, all right. I just, because we're trading pedestrian access for a loading dock.
If the client didn't need a loading dock, we wouldn't be here. And that's the issue.
Okay, that's a better answer than the code required it, okay?
Correct.
If the client wants it on that. Okay, last time, people. Do we have any further questions for the applicant? Okay, it's not a public hearing, so thank you very much on that one. What is the wish of the body on case 2014-0094 Nordstrom Rack in the Sears Mall? Mr. Walker, seconded by Mr. Sporhees. Yes, yes. And you specifically are including the department's division recommendations 1 through 7 on pages 10 and 11. Okay.
And I don't have any specific narrative or language to describe my exception, but let's say to include a sign or otherwise significantly promote access to the common areas of the mall through the Sears store. And if anybody has any additions, I would welcome it.
Mr. Sporhees, you have seconded that motion. Do you have any comments?
As I've seconded the motion, I'm in support of Mr. Walker's findings on pages 10 through 11 of our package here. And I believe that I second that as Sears is kind of driving this factor, they will be in support of our motion. Also, I think that they will welcome the additional foot traffic through their store. And even if not one of the clients buy something in the store as they're going to the common area, just to promote safety at that mall, since they are a major anchor tenant there. And that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Robinson.
Thank you. I'm not prepared to support the motion at this time. I have a very simple question, and it goes back to the connexes there. And I have not heard whether or not those are temporary or permanent. They seem permanent to me. They seem like there's tire storage for the Sears Mall. That's a convenient place to locate their tires. And I just want to know, and if they're in the process of having to make the mall look better, I think that's something that ought to be considered. And I'd at the very least like to know what their plans are for those units out in front for additional screening or coming into conformity with the code. Short of that answer, I'm not willing to support a yes vote this evening.
Okay. Any other discussion regarding Mr. Walker's motion? Mr. Walker.
Can we ask for an answer?
Well, I think that was asked, and I think the answer that was given was they don't know.
Okay.
As I believe that was what I heard.
That is true. As was stated, we do believe it has to do with ongoing renovations. I don't know, so I can't stand here and tell you that I do, but we do know that it does not have to do with Nordstrom Rack. So I am torn about how it's being tied to the decision of this project when it's not through the use of Nordstrom Rack, and if there's a way that we can resolve that or make a condition of approval that we resolve that issue instead of not making a decision on the project. I would ask that you entertain that.
I would just like to add, my name is Tim Potter for the record, that over the years, if you've been watching the renovations at the Sears Mall and throughout, that has been the location of all the connexes that the contractors have used, whether it was a small addition, modifications, or tenant improvements. And whether you've been over to the mall or not, Tyler, there's been a lot of changes and a lot of upgrades going on. And it's my belief, after watching it for a number of years, that that is the location that contractors are given to locate and co-locate their connexes with materials for tenant improvements, wiring, plumbing, all those activities. I cannot attest to the several that are there now. I will by tomorrow, and we will make sure that they are contractor related and not storage, because storage would not be permitted no matter how long they've been using that area. So my opinion is they are in violation if those are tires that they are keeping there. My belief is that they are contractor equipment and goods for installation and construction for tenant improvements within the mall space.
For current contracts only, not prior or future.
That's correct. I don't believe that the contractors are storing them there long-term either.
Depending on the season, the tire sales sign that hangs on the connexes may be a dead giveaway.
I would not conclude that given the way that you're looking for places to hang signs. So I will find out the answer, Mr. Strike.
Thank you. All right. We've argued tires and everything else on this issue tonight. Do we have any other comments prior to voting? Would you please use your machines?
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, what happens if we find out tomorrow what's the answer? We know what the answer is going to be. The answer is going to be there for contractors. Is that what we're saying?
I've heard yeah, I guess that's what we're saying, Mr. Robinson. I understand.
I'd like to know prior to the time expiration of my ability to spread notice of reconsideration, if I could.
And that's short, too. That's my 24 hours.
That's what I'm saying.
We can commit to getting Mr. Robinson an answer within his time to reconsider.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. These machines down, I got to take a look. Who hasn't voted? Okay. I believe we all voted. That motion has carried. Does anyone care to have any findings to do with that motion? Do we need any new findings on that motion? Okay, it is 8:30. We will take a 10-minute break, and then we will come back, and we will deal with design study report for the Seward Highway.
I will find the staff number.
I apologize. I did not mean to do that.
This is Department of Transportation and Public Facilities is requesting design study report approval of the connection of the old Seward Highway to the Seward Highway at the 92nd Avenue, which is referred to as Scooter Road in the report. The proposal for the 92nd Avenue connection.
Ms. O'Brien, you're going to have to speak up. I can hardly hear you.
My mic is on too.
Yeah, I just.
Pardon?
You'll just need to speak louder because the gain on the system seems to be lacking tonight.
Yeah.
How's this?
Better.
Okay.
I'll send Lori over to put the mic right at your nose next.
Actually, it is at my nose. So the proposal is an additional Seward Highway southbound lane along the Seward Highway from Diamond Boulevard on-ramp to the O'Malley Road off-ramp is included. The Seward Highway southbound on and off ramps will be installed at 92nd Avenue. Upgrades to 92nd Avenue between the old Seward Highway and the new highway ramps, and a traffic signal at the old Seward Highway and 92nd Avenue intersection. The 92nd Avenue design section, the road will be constructed as follows. There will be two 12-foot lanes, a 16-foot center two-way left turn lane, 5-foot shoulders and curb and gutter on both sides, a 6-foot concrete sidewalk offset 7.5 feet from the face of curb on the north side, a 10-foot paved pathway offset 7.5 feet from the face of curb on the south side. A 7.5-foot sidewalk pathway setback is to allow for snow storage. The horizontal alignment will be realigned 40 feet south to minimize right-of-way and utility impacts. The vertical alignment will have to be raised as high as feasible to minimize conflicts with the roadway typical section and the high groundwater table, while maintaining a profile grade that will accommodate the future interchange project. Funding for the estimated cost of $17 million has been appropriated through the State of Alaska General Obligation bonds that were enacted in 2007. The landscape design for the project is landscaping will include plants found in the project area to be preserved that include crabapple, birch, and spruce trees that will be also supplemented for diversity with larch and pine trees. Shrubs may be used to provide privacy and to screen views. Plantings will include shredded bark or mulch. The pedestrian bicycle facilities will be improved by providing paved sidewalk and pathways in accordance with the Anchorage 2010 Anchorage Bicycle Plan and the 2007 Anchorage Pedestrian Plan. The project will not affect existing illumination provided by high tower lights at the Diamond and O'Malley interchanges, but additional offset luminaires will be provided along 92nd Avenue, along with the new southbound on and off ramps, and at the intersection of Old Seward Highway and 92nd Avenue. There is, as mentioned, there is a high groundwater table, and for erosion and sediment control, existing vegetation will be maintained where possible, and all disturbed areas of the site will be stabilized. Proposed drainage improvements include the use of vegetated conveyance ditches, curb and gutter, inlets, and a pipe storm drain system to collect and dispose of stormwater to the existing storm drain systems. Due to the high groundwater, a subdrain system to convey water away from the roadway is recommended. The subdrain will connect to the proposed pipe storm drain system. Treatment of the project stormwater will be provided by 2 oil and grit separators. The project conforms to the policies of Anchorage 2020 and the recommendations of the 2035 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, the 2010 Anchorage Bicycle Plan, the 2007 Anchorage Pedestrian Plan, and the revised Official Streets and Highways Plan. 3 public meetings were held at 3 different locations for which public notices were mailed and which were and advertisements were published in the Anchorage Daily News and online, as well as advertised through the Federation of Community Councils. This comes as a 95% designed project, and there were no comments from reviewing agencies. The comments were, the system for reviewing comments for a design study report was to route this to reviewing agencies through the municipality and on the state level. And there is comments that were provided. They were summarized, and they are included in the packet that was presented by the applicant, and they are in Appendix B, labeled Agency Review Comments. So through the routing of this packet, there were no agency review comments. However, all the comments were received prior to reach the 95% design phase. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have comments from the applicant at this point?
My name is Jeff Ugelstad. I'm with Hattenberg, Dillon, Linnell, the consultant project manager, and my client is Department of Transportation. I guess at this time I have no comments, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have about the project.
Thank you. This is not a public hearing, so any questions would have to come from the commissioners. Ms. Dean.
Through the chair, I can say that I am personally very disappointed that we're seeing this project at this stage for a variety of reasons. I would like to have at least said that it would have been very nice to move the road slightly to the north so that 23 homes were not going to go away, as a minimum. There's actually more probably that will be definitely going away. With such a shortage in Anchorage of affordable housing, to take away that much affordable housing is really tough. And it's sad because now we will have no effect because that housing is all, if I'm not mistaken, been purchased on the west side of New Seward. The east side, I don't know if the purchases have been done yet. But it's just too bad that we're in this situation that we've had no impact in any of that from the Planning and Zoning Commission side. The other issue, I'm very curious. The housing has all been purchased already, and a lot of it's already been moved already between New and Old Seward, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and then why was the alignment to the south and not to the north when most of that is vacant land or unused land?
Sure.
Why go to the south?
Okay. In the initial preliminary design, we actually split the right-of-way as far as the center line of our proposed alignment initially. And then we looked at all the impacts, right-of-way, utility, a variety of impacts. And what we found was that we were impacting enough of the properties to the south that we're going to require total take anyway. We were going to make them less than the minimum required for square footage. Along with on the north side, there's a strip mall there at the northeast corner of Old Seward Highway and 92nd/Scooter. And if we impacted that parcel at all, I'm told they have less than adequate parking at this point in time, and if we touch them, we would have to provide parking for them to meet current requirements. And in that strip building, that mall, I'm sorry I don't have the exact number of businesses in there, but there's a substantial number of businesses, and it's operated as a condo-type business, I'm told. So, and then in addition to that, that's the right-of-way impacts. There's a 36-inch water line that's near the northern existing right-of-way line. And if we would have moved clear even further north, we would impact that water line because our storm drain system would be too close to it. We would meet DEC requirements. We would either have to get a waiver from them, and the geometry was such that with the shallow groundwater, our pipe storm drain system would have interfered with that 36-inch line, and therefore we would have had to relocate that 36-inch main water line that serves a substantial portion of that portion of town. So a cost-benefit analysis was performed, and essentially the answer was to move it south. And it actually, moving it south, minimized the overall right-of-way impacts and lessened the utility impacts.
And then on the other side of New Seward, is that design in here too? I don't remember seeing it. Is that a whole nother?
That is a whole different project. It's initially our original contract with DOT was to design a full interchange project there as outlined in the original EA document that was done prior to 2008. I believe it was 2006. It was approved by FHWA for the whole corridor, Seward Highway corridor, basically from Rabbit Creek to 36th Avenue. This is just a small portion of that overall project that was looked at. And so the reason you're not seeing it here is because we didn't have enough funding. Early on, we discovered we didn't have enough funding to accomplish that. And so we said, what could we do with the funding available? And this is what you're seeing here. It does serve a reasonable purpose on its own, and it is setting it up for the future project. However, there's no guarantee. That's going to go out for RFP at some point in time for consultants, and then it possibly will be a different consultant designing that.
Could you tell me an exact count of how many residential parcels are no longer going to exist?
We can find that number for you. I don't have it off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Mr. Voorhees.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The question is, what's going to happen with the existing sidewalk that currently runs at the end of Scooter there, that dead ends at the New Seward Highway?
There is no existing sidewalk along Scooter Avenue.
Not on Scooter, I apologize. Scooter dead ends, and then there's a sidewalk that runs parallel with the New Seward Highway.
Oh, the pathway, the multi-use pathway. Yes, that's an asphalt pathway.
That's correct.
And actually, I'm told in our research that was constructed by the municipality some years ago. What we're going to do is reroute that on the south. If we're going from south to north, we would reroute it to the west to follow basically the southbound on-ramp. It'll parallel that till we get to outside of the ramp terminus area, and then we'll have a mid-block crossing, if you will, there to the north side, and then it'll continue around paralleling the southbound off-ramp and then tie back into the existing. So we'll keep the continuity of it.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Will that take any more residences to do that?
To do the pathway portion? No.
Okay. Mr. Strike.
Yes, I'm looking at the map here. The southbound on-ramp from 92nd, was that extended out in order to accommodate the flow of traffic as it results, because you've got dueling on-ramp between Diamond and 92nd?
Yes.
So it was purposely extended out. So how do we address the on-ramp onto 92nd with the off-ramp from Diamond? This
You're alluding to the short distance
you
between
recognize the on-ramp, but
well, and I will clarify my answer to your original question. It's also set up that hopefully we won't need to touch that southbound on-ramp when that future project gets designed. We tried to move that far enough away. However, there still need to be retaining walls constructed in that future project, but it's also for acceleration southbound. So one of the challenges we had with this limited project and funding was that short distance between Diamond and 92nd. I mean, we have an on-ramp, southbound on-ramp from Diamond, and then a southbound off-ramp onto Scooter. And so that third lane, we decided to extend from Diamond to O'Malley, and that'll give a chance for the traffic to weave.
Because you have competing traffic with cars accelerating.
That's correct.
And decelerating for the off-ramp. What about truck traffic for commercial vehicle traffic or truck routes? Is this a designated truck route?
92nd Avenue is not a designated truck route.
Will it be designated not to be a truck route?
As far as the design purposes, we look at what kind of design vehicle we anticipate, but we don't designate whether it's a truck route or not. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for the applicant? I have one question. I travel that road frequently into town. I live in South Anchorage. And pedestrians crossing the freeway are frightening. I have twice locked them up hard to try to miss somebody. I was screened by a truck, and then suddenly this child jumps out in front of you, and you're doing 70 miles an hour, and he's from me to you. I mean, I can see the whites of his eyes. I got around him, and I guess nobody behind him hit him either. But and last year on the Glen, we hit a pedestrian and killed a pedestrian crossing the highway because there's no convenient place. We either have to build an impenetrable barrier on the east side there, or handle, I mean, the pedestrians are, you're making it wider, which gives, I mean, the pedestrians now have 2 more lanes to dodge. The speed's not decreasing. I'm disappointed that, because, I mean, as soon as we hit somebody, I assure you the $2 million will suddenly be available on it. And so I'm disappointed that we don't address the ongoing pedestrian issue at that location, because it is very, very real.
Can I speak to that?
And I think she wants to get your eye too.
Yeah. We recognize that issue. We've heard comments. I haven't personally seen it, but I'm well aware that it's there. And so the department's not ignoring that issue. DOT is in the process of putting out a project to upgrade the fencing on the east side between Brayton Drive. There is some existing fencing there. The pedestrians cut through it. I know I've seen the holes there. I recognize that. And I think the $2 million you're alluding to was, yes, we did look hard at could we accommodate an undercrossing even under this project, even though we're not doing the interchange under this project. And geometry-wise, it was feasible. The estimated cost was $2 million, as you alluded to. It would have been, and I kind of hate to use this term, but it would be a throwaway project. It would have been, as soon as the interchange project is constructed, then there will be full pedestrian access from the east side to the west side, if you will, along Scooter Avenue underneath the proposed bridge under that concept. And yes, that is delayed by a number of years, but that's where we ended up.
All righty. Do we have any other questions? If not, I have one question for staff. Erica, I asked about, and this does not impact your project, but your project came to us late. okay? And I don't believe it had anything to do with you guys. I believe it got caught in the wash. Did you ever get an answer to my email regarding the Seward Highway improvements between Diamond and Dowling?
Mr. Chair, I have to admit, I dropped the ball on that one. I apologize.
Okay, would you?
I'll follow up tomorrow, first thing tomorrow morning.
And tell them that the absence has been noted on that one. Okay. This calls for a resolution. Am I correct on this?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Even though this is still another context-sensitive design.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Eric Mirshiro. I'm the project manager for this project. I'm also the project manager for the Seward Highway Diamond and Dowling project.
Okay.
And we will be before this body here in the next few weeks with a kind of a final package for your review and approval.
We would appreciate that. And I appreciate your letter also. Thank you, sir. You got saved again, Erica. So this one takes a motion. The other one earlier today didn't take a motion, and they're both submitted under the context-sensitive design. And the difference is the state of development of the drawings?
Correct, Mr. Chair. This is step 2. The previous one was step 1.
Thank you very much. All righty. No further questions? What's the wish of the body on this issue? If somebody pushed their machine, I haven't seen it yet. Where we can't make a motion, we want, okay, we got something. Mr. Strike.
Boy, I'll give this a try. Motion to approve. Where's my number? Case 2014-0104 to accept the draft design study report for the Seward Highway 92nd Avenue connector as submitted.
Mr. Sporhees seconded it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I second the motion. I think that they've done their due diligence, and it's a good project and ready to move forward.
Mr. Strike, would you care to comment anything further?
Nope. I think it was while late, it's a comprehensive package. It addresses the requirements. While it's not the ideal spot for the homes and so forth that were disrupted and moved and changed, this is a move forward in this area to move the congestion and the traffic.
Thank you, Ms. Dean.
I'd like to offer some different findings. I'm disappointed that the DOT did not supply us with 25% plans. I'm disappointed that the DOT did not work with us at all. And I'm disappointed that a lot of people are going to lose their homes because they didn't want to decrease the parking of a commercial property and possibly move a utility line. I just hate to see the loss of affordable housing in Anchorage.
Thank you, Ms. Dean. Any further comments on this motion? Let's use our machines to vote, please. This motion is passed with at least one no, and somebody else is missing. Okay, one no. We're having trouble with our machines and our counting tonight. If you wonder what's going on, I'm not rigging the votes up here, but some machines are working and some are not. So that's the confusion. I apologize. Okay. This next one is a public hearing. Now back up. Lori reminded me, on the case we just had, an individual may have appeal rights relating to any action of the Planning and Zoning Commission takes, except for Commission's recommendations to the Assembly, which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the Clerk's Office within 20 days after approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission of the resolution, which is the Commission's final approval. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. Okay. On our public hearing, after the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the Chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the Commission Rules and Procedures, which are petitioners, including all of his or her representatives, 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. B, representatives of groups, community council, PTAs, etc., 5 minutes. Individuals, 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the Commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the Commission. And I just read to you the appeal rights, and an individual may request written findings from any Commission decision within 7 days. On the matter of case 2014-0101, do we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a proposed rezone from B2C to PCSL under the old code, AMC 2120-090 zoning map amendments. Let's see here. Ownership of the property, this is a rezone for a single parcel of land. Ownership of the property was recently transferred from the federal government to the Alaska Railroad Corporation. The petitioner has stated that they have no immediate plans for redevelopment of the site. However, they want the parcel zoning to match the rest of their property in the Ship Creek area. AMC 212090 states that a rezone may be approved if it conforms to the comp plan and meets 4 conditions of approval. Section A, the proposed rezone will implement the 2007 Anchorage Downtown Comprehensive Development Plan strategy diagram, which identifies the petition site as Ship Creek redevelopment. The proposed rezone to PCSL complies with the comprehensive plan, which groups the petition site with the rest of the PCSL district. Section B, the rezone supports factors 1 through 4, with the proposed area for the rezoning complying to the proposed PCSL district being compatible with the surrounding land uses. The PCSL district lists the permitted, accessory, conditional, and also prohibited uses. This district also contains design standards and creates review procedures. And the proposed rezone does not affect the distribution of land uses or residential densities because residential uses are permitted in both the B2C and PCSL districts. This rezone would allow for consistent development across railroad land and in the Ship Creek area. Both the B2C and PCSL districts allow a variety of commercial and residential uses. The PCSL district differs from the B2C district as it allows for light industrial uses. The PCSL district is a unique zoning district that is meant for the Ship Creek redevelopment area, and there are design review requirements that make it compatible with adjacent downtown districts. With that being said, the rezone generally meets the standards for zoning map amendments found in AMC 2120-090, and the rezone will allow for a more compatible zoning designation that is representative of the Alaska Railroad Corporation lands. The department recommends approval of the rezoning to PCSL subject to the listed restrictions and design standards of AO 2006-46S. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for staff? Is the applicant here?
Thank you, Chair. Members of the Commission, my name is Dwayne Adams. I'm with Earthscape, representing the petitioner, the Alaska Railroad Corporation, and I do have a representative of the Alaska Railroad Corporation, their Vice President for Real Estate and Development, Mr. Jim Kubitz, who could answer questions as well. Fundamentally, what you have before you is a simple housekeeping measure. Approximately 6-7 years ago, actually 2007, January 2007, an AO 2006-046 was passed, and with that came the design regulations, design guidelines that guide the development of approximately 100 acres down in the Ship Creek Basin to provide for mixed use down in that area. That extends throughout this 100 acres virtually to the small dam that's there, and then outbound near the water. The railroad acquired an additional parcel, which was an old GSA managed parcel, and in doing so has this 1.7 acres that they simply want included into that rezone so that all these lands that are potential leases by the railroad have the same required regulations. Thus, that mixed-use development, those design guidelines, which are far beyond anything that exists certainly in the downtown area, apply throughout their lands. So that's what the intent is. Now, there has been some confusion with respect to some language that's in the AO 2006-046, the ordinance that governs this, in that it has restrictions on how high buildings can be. It has the same language that is within the existing zoning classification, and that is buildings may be constructed within the full limits of the lot up to 3 stories in height. Building construction above those stories in height shall conform to the building requirements under section 2140-160H, which is the B2B, but the B2B and the B2C are virtually identical except for the number of stories that are allowed. So, in essence, whether this is approved or not, if you were to deny this, that same language, which is 3-story limitation, will exist. But the exception is that with bulk allowances for each lot, and with bonus points, there is the allowance to go above that. In Title 21 for B2C, the zoning classification we're talking about, that it currently exists, applies. So regardless, under the new or proposed or the existing, that same language governs. A maximum of 3 stories, except with the bulk allowances, and with bonus points, there is the allowance to go higher. Now, where is this exhibited? If you look at the Peterson Tower, 9-story building at the west end of downtown, that's B2C. So it's not hard to get there. That happens very often, but that's done under the existing requirements. It's also done with an administrative review by staff. Under the zoning that's proposed, it's a much more rigorous investigation that has to go before a panel that is within the existing ordinance. It also has to comply with the mixed-use requirements, the parking requirements, much more diligence with respect to what is required than is required under the B2C. So there's, I think, some misunderstanding that because that language in there that is actually intended to reduce that height so that there will never be necessarily a 9-story building at that location, that applies to this. But under the existing ordinance, the existing zoning, that doesn't apply. I think there's some confusion that we're trying to get a higher allowance. That allowance exists. The language is the same. So that doesn't matter. I would note that there are existing properties nearby. Both the Anchorage Grand Hotel is 4 stories. It's in the B2C, and it's a block away. Turnagain Arms condominium project is about 2.5 across from the westward. That's 5 stories. It's B2C as well. So it does exist in the local area. It exists throughout Anchorage. It's the way the zoning code is written. It's very confusing. There's no doubt about that, and it's very easy to understand why people would be confused. But what we're doing does not change that in any way whatsoever. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have some.
You have about 5 minutes for rebuttal if you need it, Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Wait, hang on a second. Ms. Dean has a question for you.
Through the chair, my question is just from a redevelopment standpoint. What is the seismic zoning for that parcel?
That's supposed to be, it's 5. And when we talk about things that are going to limit how and,
right.
You know, that probably has as much effect as anything.
Right.
You know, and I really can't address how that might be characterized. But yeah, that definitely has an impact.
You're not going to be able to go very high anyway. Just,
yes.
The moment frame is going to be so massive.
Yeah, and I can't, I'm not a genius or very smart when it comes to geotech, but it's definitely a limitation of the site. I mean, that whole buttress area.
Mr. Strike?
Yeah. How is the current property being used?
How is it being used? Well, it's not being used. It's vacant right now. It was used by GSA as a terminal for their vehicle operations. They did some management primarily. They did a little maintenance there, I believe.
but they consolidated their operations, I guess, and then they disposed of it.
What is your short-term?
There's no plans. More than anything else, it's like I said, it's a housekeeping so that if someone comes through, the rules are in place to make sure that the rules are the railroad's rules, which are more specific to what they're trying to achieve down there, which is a mixed-use development. And so there, of course, is a confusion, but it's certainly not in any way intended to escape any height limitations. It's to achieve that mixed-use vision that they spent a lot of time, a lot of money trying to get in place, and this just wraps this into that.
Mr. Robinson?
Thank you. You know, when you were talking about the PC district as being a part of the, you know, the 100 or so acres down in, you know, and you said the Ship Creek Basin, this parcel does not feel like it's down in the Ship Creek Basin, right? It's as you kind of transition up into town. And I wonder if there's anything in the design guidelines or the railroad's, you know, sort of criteria that sort of recognizes this as a transition area where it really is as much associated with downtown and that part of downtown as it is what will and is, you know, is currently developed down in Ship Creek.
Well, there's the guidelines are not a land use plan specifically. It is a description of vision, and it's a description of how that has to be achieved. It's short of that framework plan that is more specific with what kind of buildings, where. It's much more with respect to how that has to take place. Now, with respect, though, in discussions, that's really a key piece to getting pedestrians down there. That there was a fellow, Paul Burrell, who did a master's thesis that is embraced unofficially by the railroad, but provides a pretty good vision as to what would happen. And that's a really good place to provide for some vertical circulation, because it's at elevation 52, and at the bottom of that bluff is 20. So there's 30 feet there that right now is kind of a barrier to pedestrian circulation. So, without getting into any land use plan is very specific to how that might happen. That's the developer has to do that. It is envisioned as an opportunity to look at that vertical circulation and make that work at that location. And that the Ship Creek Framework Plan, you may remember, has aspects of that included in that, and some of that was discussions with the railroad. And I mean, it's a logical place for that to happen, as a place that steps down and allows that.
Thank you. So by that you mean connecting this upper portion to the lower portion?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Correct. Thank you.
Any other further questions from the applicant? Thank you very much.
Very much.
The public hearing for case 2014-0101 is now open. If you care to testify, please step up to the microphone. Please state your name and spell it for the record, please.
May I present a letter?
Yes.
My name is Doug Ferris. I'm a resident of Tourniquet Arms condominiums, and the gentleman before me, he may allay some of my concerns here. The condo board was unable to attend this evening, but they drafted a letter which pretty much echoes my sentiments, so I'll just read you the letter. The Tourniquet Arms Condo Association represents 70 homeowners, tenants of Tourniquet Arms condos located at 525 West 3rd Avenue. The Condo Association is writing this letter to express our opposition to the proposed rezoning of 701 West 2nd Avenue from a B2C district to a PCSL district. The issue we have with the proposed rezoning is if a new building is permitted up to a height of 120 feet MSL, it would obstruct the view of the majority of the homeowners on the west side of Tourniquet Arms condos. The appeal and a substantial inherent value of each condo is derived from the current unobstructed views we currently have over Connect Arm. By allowing a taller structure under PCSL zoning to be built, our property values would suffer. Even the condos facing eastward would see a potential drop in property values as the neighbors' units facing west drop in value. The condo association has no objection to the use of the property, only to the opposition to the building heights. Several of our homeowners are members of the Downtown Community Council, and one was in attendance at the June meeting when an Alaska Railroad representative was scheduled to present their proposal. The Alaska Railroad representative was a no-show, so the proposed rezoning was not officially presented. Therefore, no substantial discussions occurred on this matter. This was subsequently subscribed in a planning staff analysis as the Downtown Community Council did not provide comments. We find that to be a mischaracterization of events that occurred at the Downtown Community Council June meeting. And according to the mailings, it was stated that 92 notices of this public hearing were mailed out. The Tourniquet Arm Condo Association represents 70 out of those 92 mailings, and the Tourniquet Arm Condo Association strongly opposes this proposed rezoning. And that was drafted by the Tourniquet Arms Condo Association. I do have one correction to that letter, that there were actually 97 mailings sent out. And I have a number of, or a handful of rental properties in this building also. And it's an older building with its inherent problems. And all my prospective tenants who come to look at the building, they overlook that and they all comment, the view sold them. So I don't want to lose that. Thank you.
Hang on one second. We have at least 2 questions for you.
Okay.
Ms. Dean.
Through the chair, how do you feel now after hearing that it is seismic 5 down there? It will be extremely expensive and difficult in order to develop a building any taller than 2 or even 3 stories.
Yeah, there's a building right across the street, an apartment building, which is 2.5 stories. The garden level is half story down. And I feel anything above that would obstruct our views. So 2.5 stories would be.
Now that you know, though, that it isn't going to sound like it's going to be probably an issue for you, how do you feel now?
If it were 3 stories, it would be an issue because it would block several of our lower level tenants.
Okay, thank you.
So, but other than that, I don't have an issue with it. So.
You understand what the applicant said?
Yes, I do.
That he's got the same right to build to the same height under either zoning.
I understand. And we did review all the submissions beforehand, and it is rather confusing. And I thought, since I'm here, I want it on record. but I did allay some of my concerns. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Will the next person please come forward and speak?
Good evening. I'm James Toussaint, Toussaint. I live in Tourniquet Arms. I have a beautiful view of the inlet. And that's what we're all concerned about, is that view. And I'm on the 3rd floor, so anything over 3 stories, that's a little down from us. But in a few, it would affect our view and our property values, obviously. The seismic is one thing, but we don't want a zoning change because I believe there was some errors in the presentation. I don't know, I'm not an expert, but I read a little bit and I can understand. In the notice of the public hearing, this case is not even on the active list. It's hard to find information. I just found some information out in the hallway here I wasn't aware of. This case is not even on the active list on the community zoning. So that was a problem for many people in the area to find, even to make a comment or to do anything on this, find information. I want to point out some errors in logic and facts in the application of the railroad and the analysis of the planning staff. On analysis in G1, page 2. You all have that in front of you? Talking about medium-sized residential developments and small-scale hotels. And in B, on page 3, the zoning map may be approved only if it is in the best interest of the public, considering the following. The effect of development under amendments and cumulative effect of similar development on the surrounding neighborhood, the general area and the community, including but not limited to, and it goes on, special limitation, any adverse effects. The proposed PCSL district is compatible with the land use uses in the area. I don't think so. It's not compatible. This is the neighborhood we live in. And the changes that could happen if it went to 120-foot mean sea level, a building, and they can build anything nowadays, go down bedrock and maybe you can build something. Highly unlikely, but I just don't want it to happen, period. None of us do. And the land, on that same page, land use patterns, the properties to the east across Christian Drive and to the south across West 2nd Avenue are both Zone B2C and have mixed on office and single-family uses. That's true. And I believe our building, it's an 8-story building. That was built in the 50s. The Peterson Tower, I believe, was built in the 60s. These are all grandfathered in. I don't think they can, they say 3 stories in the zoning for a reason. And this, any zone, anything over 3 stories would not be compatible with our area.
That sign, your time was up. Can you summarize quickly?
Well, there's many places in this planning statement, this G1 statement, that talks about compatibility and does not affect the surrounding areas. It would definitely affect the surrounding areas, and it's not compatible with our neighborhood, and we're against it in the neighborhood.
Thank you. Any questions for this speaker? Any questions? Oh, thank you for your testimony, sir. Next speaker, come forward, please.
Good evening. My name is Rhonda Butterfield. I am an attorney and I rent office space at 725 Christensen Drive, which is directly across the street to the south of the property. I've got some photos here to show our building taken, and this was taken Saturday, from the driveway leading onto 2nd Avenue. I'm concerned about the proposed rezoning in large part because those of us directly around this neighborhood received no notice of this proposal. We heard from Mr. Toussaint, who brought around a copy of his notice late last week. The owner of this building, Patricia Holloway, who has written a letter, received no notice. There are 5 tenants in this building, all of whom have a north view, which would be blocked by any building on that property. We received no notice. I talked with 2 attorneys in the building right next door to us at 750 West 2nd Avenue. They knew nothing about this. And so this has all been sprung on us, and all we hear is rumors, oh, they're going to build a big building, and so we're concerned about that. But my concern is, why didn't those people who would be directly affected by any construction on that lot get notice of this proposal? So whoever's responsible for providing notice to the people who own land and have interests in the land, such as renters, need to be looked at in terms of, have they done their job? And I would suggest no, not in this instance. I've got 27 photographs of the view to Mount McKinley that I have from the top floor of this building. And there's nothing better than living in a place like Anchorage and being able to see Mount McKinley on a clear day. And so the view is everything to us. And even from a lower floor, you can see Mount McKinley on a clear day. Yeah, it's only the peak, but you still get to see the greatest mountain in North America. You can see the activity in the port. I'd hate to have anything disrupt that. We can see the fishermen down there at the mouth of Ship Creek. We can see when the water comes in and when it's flooded. And we can see the ships coming in and out. We watch the airplanes play out of Elmendorf. And occasionally we'd see the airplanes taking off from Merrill Field. And if I had a really good arm, I could hit one of those with a baseball. They're that close and that low sometimes. And if there was a building of any magnitude, like 6 stories or so, a plane would fly right into it. if there was a 6-story building on this property. My other concerns are, besides potentially blocking our view, is the safety. The access to that property onto 2nd Avenue goes across the coastal trail. I'll make it very quick. The other access out onto Christensen is right in the middle of a short block with a 90-degree turn at where tour buses are coming in and out all the time. They're driving down Christensen Drive, going on to 1st Avenue and making a right and going down to the railroad depot and coming back. And so the limited access to this property is not going to support much traffic going in and out of that. Thank you very much.
We have a question for you here, so hang loose, please. Ms. Dean.
Through the chair, I was hoping that staff could provide you answers with the policy and procedure of how they go through notifying the public. We don't notify renters because renters change. We have no way of knowing who they are. So there's no process to do that. So the landlords or the property owners are notified. Now, I didn't see the list. I don't know if staff has a list of who received a mailing. I don't know. I know they keep track of all that, who it went to, how many they got back that were rejected, that the person never picked up their mail or was the wrong address. So I believe staff can give you some input on that.
Okay, thank you. We've been there 4 years, and other tenants have been there longer. And if I can explain, GMG was paving that street, was paving 2nd Avenue a couple of months ago. They came around and they hand-delivered a notice to every single suite. That's all it would take.
Okay. Erica, would you please summarize the notice procedure?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ms. Dean. I do have a list of everybody that we mailed notice to. As I think Mr. O'Dell stated, there were, or maybe it was one of the other commenters stated, there were 97 notices mailed. So again, the list is here, and I'd be happy to share it with the commenter. We do mail to within 600 feet of a parcel, as long as that provides at least 50 parcels. And if there aren't 50 parcels within 600 feet, we continue to go out until we achieve 50 parcels. In this situation, there were, so this was within 600 feet. I would also note that this was processed under the old Title 21. In the new Title 21, there is a new provision that we do have to notify residents as well as property owners. So in the future, we will be sending out many, 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 many more notices, because we will be notifying, and it will just go to resident. So of course, we don't track the names of renters, but it will go out to resident at every single address as well as property owner. But again, that's the new code. That's not the situation that happened in this particular case.
Question on, if I've got a business on would I get notified if I lease space for a business? You use the word resident.
You would get a notification, as long as you have an address, you would have a notification that would say resident, even if you were a business.
No, there is a process, and they do follow it. And I mean, we hear this occasionally, that the people didn't get notice, and I don't know, but there is a process. They do send them out, and I do think that they try very hard to get notices. Now, if you didn't get yours, I don't know why, okay, but I just tell you on that one. But thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I would just add that the code also requires that the site actually be posted itself, and so there's a picture at the end of the packet of those pictures. Yes. What that'll lead you to is either a phone number or a case number. Now, I heard testimony that the cases online was not working. I tried just now to get on, and I honestly couldn't get on it. That said, there is a phone number on there that would probably get you to the gentleman sitting over there. But I guess if I could, one other question. When you gave your testimony, you talked not only about the third floor of the building, but the ground floor of the building.
Yes.
Are you suggesting then that a development of any type would be inappropriate at this site?
I don't know, because I didn't know enough about what the proposal was. I mean, all I saw was a copy of Mr. Toussaint's notice of a public hearing. to change the zoning. So I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't know what the railroad's plans were. But it could be. It could be appropriate or not. Right now, there's about a 1.5-story old tin-looking building on the property that many consider an eyesore.
And I understand from the railroad is likely to go away in the future, which would lead to something else. And I think just to be clear here, whether this rezoning takes place or not, there will be a separate development process that likely doesn't require a public process, but does have a process involved in it. And so you're sort of, what you have is the rules are changing slightly from one zoning district to another. Some would argue that they're becoming more stringent with the new zoning than what they were previously. But thank you for your testimony.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Last but not least.
I think you're it. I think we've...
We're on final approach.
Well, I tell you, it's a lot better than when at 11:30 when we're at this stage.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be minutes. My name is Richard Thorpe. I own a small company, Alaska Legal Support. I'm in the same office that Rhonda is in, and I'm a spokesperson for the landlord of the building, which is Pat Holloway, who told me that she didn't get it, contrary to what she said that the landlord or the person on record gets it. I happened to call that phone number that was on that signpost of the picture that you have today and didn't get a phone call back. I called 2 times. So for whatever constructive criticism that is to help refine the process works. My point would be, if I was sitting on your end of the table, that it's very interesting to me, the first thing he came out was, and he said, there's no difference between the B2C and the PC because it allows for you the bulk allowance and it allows for bonus points. But what he didn't say was he didn't say what makes up the bulk allowance. So does the bulk allowance have to do with the 1.73 acres, or does the bulk allowance have to do with the entire Ship Creek area? And if you look on in the regulation, it talks specifically about B2 or PC being big swaths of land, and to be able to utilize it for the best interest of that land. But we're not in a classic would be Ship Creek. I think it uses that for an example, and it also uses Southport. But we're not talking about a large swath. We're talking about 1.73 acres. And as Mr. Robinson brought up, this is very close to, all these other houses. It's separate from all of that. In my interpretation of this, I used to be the Mercedes dealer here. I put up that structure that you see now that Worthington bought from me. And what I've heard is spot zoning. And I don't think it's far-fetched to say that what they're trying to do is to get this 1.73 so that they are consistent, so that whatever they want to put up, 3 floors, 6 floors, it just makes it an easier transition for them, and I don't think that it's consistent with all the other buildings that are in that area. So those are the questions that I would ask. I know that if Pat were here, she'd say, please don't approve this without more due diligence. And that would be the question that I would have for him. I'm very suspicious the way he came out and advocated this. And so those would be in my head. I don't have anything further.
Okay.
Don't want to be here till 11:30.
Hang loose. Hang there for 1 minute, please. Any questions for the speaker? Question for staff. The bulk allowance would be limited to the acreage on that particular parcel. Am I correct?
Mr. Chair, speaking of the application, so if we're looking at pages 40 and 41 of your packet, which is AO 2006-46S, the bulk and maximum lot coverage limitations. So you're looking at L on page 41. Is that what your question is referring to? That would apply per lot.
Per lot. So in answer to your question you raised rhetorically, whether the bulk allowance applied to the whole site or just, it would only apply to the parcel in question, which is the 1.73 acres.
So I don't know why there is all the effort to change this if there's no difference.
I mean,
that's really suspicious to me.
thank you. Any further questions for this applicant? Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
For your testimony.
Thanks for your attention.
Mr. Adams, you have approximately 5 minutes of rebuttal time.
Thank you, Chair Ferguson. Let me address a couple points. Mr. Ferris suggested that I failed to show up at a meeting. I did try to contact the chair of the community council. I sent an email. I received no response, so I didn't attend the meeting. I did follow up with a phone call. He said, "What are you trying to do here?" I explained what we're doing here. He said, "So does this change the height regulations?" I said the height regulations stay exactly the same. He says, "Well, I'm fine with that then." I've had chats with Mr. Kubitz, and I think this sounds just fine. And if you look in the package, you see his first response from the community council or from Mr. Nangle is no issues or no conflict or something like that. So I did ask Mr. Nangle, well, would you like to have another meeting to discuss this? He goes, "No, I consider it closed." So that was it. And there was no reason to follow up. With respect to, I think one thing that's important is we seem to be very worried about this one lot, this 1.7 acres. Every single homeowner in this B2C has the same opportunity or the same possibilities that this lot has, regardless of what happens. So we're very worried about this one lot, but that very same concern relative to the views pertain to every single lot along that hillside, and that's a staff review. That's not a public hearing. It's relegated to a staff review under the existing zoning. So that doesn't change. With respect to suspicion relative to what we're trying to do, we're trying to make sure that every lease that anybody enters within the Ship Creek area plays by the same rules. Simply put, this is probably something that will transform that area over 20 to 50, maybe even 100 years. There's going to be a lot of different administrations within the railroad and within the leasing department and within the railroad real estate office. Right now, Mr. Kubitz is a pretty forward-thinking guy who understands mixed use, and in perpetuity, to the degree possible, he wants to ensure that the things that will make that area healthy and contribute to the success of the railroad real estate operations lies in mixed-use development, carefully thought-out development, and binding others to that understanding of what works. That's what we're trying to do here. If this were to be denied, the only thing that changes is the design guidelines don't apply, and then the 120 to 150 limitation could be much higher. So there's no cars, there's no charades, and there's no smoke screen. That's what the zoning allows. And the Peterson Tower was built in the 80s. It wasn't built in the 60s. It wasn't built in the 50s. Certainly, Turnagain Arms may have been. I don't know. But Peterson Tower is a relatively new kid on the block, and that P2C zoning, that B2 zoning throughout downtown existed then. So, that's the cards are on the table. There's nothing up the sleeves. It's, in our view, a simple administrative manner to try to get things consistent throughout this area and to allow it to be what I think can be very contributory to the Anchorage downtown and certainly to that area that has a lot of promise.
Any questions? Any further question, applicant? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Have a seat. What is the wish of the body on case 2014-0101? Mr. Robinson.
In the matter of case 2014-0101, rezone from B2C to PCSL, I move that we recommend approval to the Anchorage Assembly for the rezoning to PCSL.
We have a second, Mr. Voorhees. Mr. Robinson, do you care to speak to your motion?
Yes, I am going to be supporting this motion. There's a couple of things that lead me to support it. Number one is this was an area that was contemplated in the downtown comprehensive plan and identified as an area that would be redeveloped in conjunction with the Ship Creek area. And so I think that we've had this discussion on this part of land and how it would be developed. I do also think that while I was concerned about the notice situation, and I do believe that there are some errors related to potentially how people were noticed or not noticed, I do think that the issues have been fleshed out here pretty clearly. And those issues, I think, whether it's by the 5 or so people that spoke tonight or by 70 people, I think they would be pretty similar issues. And those issues would be height and site and preservation of view sheds. And I think that that is a very tough issue in this community, and we've treaded very lightly on what is a right of a single property owner versus what is a right to preserve in terms of view sheds. And along those notes, I don't believe that I'm willing to suggest that this site be restricted any more than it is currently. And so I don't believe that the zoning to which I'm recommending it go to, that there is a change. I do believe that the Ship Creek design guidelines allow for a more thoughtful approach to design. I also will tell you in driving around this area that this will be a very challenging parcel to develop. There's access issues. There's the way that the roads come up grade and around bends. It's going to be a tough site to develop. And I think what we might fear is going to be a very large development. May not be that. You may see something similar to what is there already in the future. I'm not sure. So while I hear the concerns of those of you that came tonight, I do believe that we're consistent with our comprehensive plan and we otherwise meet the standards of a rezoning.
Thank you very much. Mr. Voorhees, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. No, I think Mr. Robinson did a full and complete job in expressing his findings of facts, and I support him 100%. Thanks.
Anyone else have any comments before we use our machines? May we please vote? Okay, the motion has passed. Anyone care to add any findings? Thank you. You have appeal rights, but not on this case, actually. On that one. Now, before we go, Mr. Robinson asked to have a few minutes to talk about Title 21. Mr. Robinson, and then Ms. McConnell.
Yeah, and I actually, before I did, I have one quick one as well. I noticed the August 4th meeting, there's a slated work session for the East Anchorage District Plan, and I wondered if Ms. McConnell could carry back to Ms. Wong that I think what we had really asked for was a work session to be held out, more than just the evening, 1 hour before we go into a meeting. So if there's any issues that we can't figure out, we've got a little bit of time to figure that out. So that would be my concern. If we have that work session not until then, we could be right back to another meeting all over again. But thank you, Mr. Chair, on the Title 21 issue, under sort of committee reports. Just wanted to mention that I think there's a lot of conversation around the community right now about what we do related to the existing code, the old code, and whether or not there's another grace period year for the old code. I will tell you that it's something that we have conversations with internally at my company. And we actually have 2 types of residential developments that have or are coming through the new code. one as a multifamily building and one as multiple structures on a lot. And I think it's something that's going to come up in front of this committee, and I'm open to the idea of sort of recommending that we move this grace period forward. But I also think that we all need to put our heads together and help staff as well and figure out a way that we can find a process that gets us all on the right path. I don't want this to be, the private sector against staff. I want to be cognizant of the resources that staff has. I think it's evidence of the fact that we still don't have a user's guide, and we're, halfway through the year, and frankly, I don't know when a user's guide is coming. That is, I think, a testament to the resources that staff does not have to help us facilitate this new code. So I think what I'm saying is I think you will likely see me support, even though we are, as a company, pursuing new code, and I don't want to be the only company that goes forward under the new code. I want others to tell me what their challenges are. I do want to, if you can, sort of approach it in a way that's positive and tries to look for real solutions and doesn't put people on the defensive. And so I think with that, I don't know where we go exactly, but I would also like to see us have kind of an invitation to staff to have regular amendments to the new code, not held for, until batches of 3 months or 4 months or whatever, but just have it be a standing item. And if we can dribble things, identify the problems as they come up and process them, I think we'd be better off than trying to hold them for, until we reach perfection.
I totally agree. I would like to come forward as part of a team, not come forward as adversarial. I totally agree on that. And I absolutely agree, come forward in batches. Looking back on Title 21, I feel one mistake I made was when the discussion was whether we do it the whole thing at one time or do it in batches. I was pretty adamant that I wanted to do it all one thing, and I think that was a mistake. I really think that was, we gave it too big of a target there, and that was one reason it took so long. So I really agree. I would like to see issues come dribbling through and get them resolved, because most of the builders now are working on next year's projects, and we need to show some leadership here as what's going on so they can get it worked out. I totally agree with you, Mr. Robinson.
Yeah, and I can't emphasize this enough. I want this to feel as though we're working to try to come up with the thing that makes the most sense for all of us, but we have not identified the problems until we run a project through the thing. And that's the thing that and as soon as if we put off, and Cook Inlet Housing is the only one running projects through, I have concerns that we just won't identify them, and we'll just keep kicking the can down the road. So I don't know how to get at that one, but if anyone has any suggestions on, because you can't pay an A&E team to go ahead and give me the code evaluation of your project as though it costs money. But that's really where we find out, is this just kind of a one-off thing that's really particular to your project, or it's something that's more, sort of systemic to the way that the code is written, right?
We agreed we would not deal with the one-offs because there were too many of them on it, but I think the one way to do it is everybody that submits on the old code, ask them why. What specifically steered them away from the new code? Because I thought we would be seeing more, and we haven't. Okay, Ms. Barker, then Ms. McConnell, you were in the queue, so I won't forget you over there, Ms.
I think
Barker.
in concept, it's kind of the notion of the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. And so the question I find myself asking, in addition to, I think it's very well taken, let's ask people why they're making the selection they are. Maybe based on the results of what we find from that research are there some incentives that we can offer for developers to come in under the new code, whether those incentives are fee abatement or streamlined processing? What can we do to facilitate getting the new code that we worked so hard on for so long actually into full implementation?
Ms. McConnell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were three things I wanted to say. So one, I'll briefly respond to this, and perhaps we can talk more about it at the director's lunch on Thursday. But if I were to, my belief is that if I were to ask most applicants who choose the old code why they choose the old code, it would be unfamiliarity with the new code, that they haven't had time to learn it. And maybe that means we give them another year, but maybe that means they're going to be in this exact same position December of 2015. I mean, at some point, you just have to go. You have to go to the new code. And I have to tell you, it is an incredible burden on the staff to implement two codes at the same time. I hear Mr. Robinson and the things that are lacking. Believe me, I stay awake at night thinking about all the things that haven't gotten done. But at some point, you just need to go. So perhaps, again, we can talk more about it at the director's lunch on Thursday. Losing my two other things. One of them was I did want to apologize for having the phone ring in the middle of the meeting. I know that's incredibly rude. We were trying to call Granicus because of the issues that were happening tonight with the voting. They did finally call back. They were unable to solve it for this evening, but they are, have elevated it through their help process. So my apologies. I apologize that the system hasn't been functioning properly.
The first time in 2 years. Don't worry about it.
And I had in terms of the East Anchorage District Plan work session, is there a preferred time? I mean, can you give me some ideas of when you might like to have it? I do understand you don't want to have it before a meeting. Lunchtime, after work on a different night?
As I recall, and I was hopeful that we would have had this thing, a couple of weeks after after we had the hearing when we were all thinking about the darn thing. But, I think Mr. Spring and I at least were two that had indicated a desire, and then we had heard some fairly compelling testimony from Mr. Potter that I think some of us wanted to bring forward related to zoning on Muldoon Road. I would just say, we'll find a time. And if there's anybody other than, Spring, myself, then that'll be who we coordinate around. I'm gone next week, so I, was hopeful that it would have happened before then, but short of that, the week before the meeting.
Erica, what I hear saying is Mr. Robinson has the authority of the group to work with you and set a date up, and we'll go from there.
And the question, I've had questions from the community saying, well, can we, we heard Fairview participated in that. I do see that a little different. Fairview was, in fact, the petitioner of the Fairview, district plan or neighborhood plan. So it is a little bit different, but clearly there should be notice and people should at least be allowed to sit in on it, if not participate.
I will certainly relay that message to Ms. Wong and to Mr. Tobish, and perhaps we can set up something for early in the last week of July. Again, I'm trying to be cognizant of the Commission's request to keep meetings in the weeks when you have other meetings, but
yeah, we'll throw some dates up.
Okay,
and figure it out.
we'll do something like that. Thank you.
I think I'm having a rebellion among the children. There's been a motion and a second already to adjourn, so I think we're having issues up here. All in favor say aye. Thank you, everyone.